Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal Venerable. See playlist for other chapters and novels. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 2401, Slaughter. You dream on it. A demi-holy being from the Qin clan sneered in contempt. Holy beings could still be reborn even after they died in this place. Once Samuel killed all the holy beings present, he would need to start wars in the universes after he returned to the floating island of Han Clan. But regarding the launch of a universal war, a lot of restrictions had already been stated on the ruling state. It would not be so easy to destroy a universe. Otherwise, Nicholas would not have tolerated the existence of the evolutionary universe for so many years. Shut up, Samuel refuted as the long spear on his hand slightly trembled. His spear had once again created a space channel. The space channel didn't suck the blue-eyed girl in. This time, only some ice flowers were implicated. Seeing Samuel's action, the demi-holy being was dumbfounded as the expression on his face changed drastically. He in turn had subconsciously wanted to escape, but when he was just less than 1,000 feet away, a space fluctuation came from behind him. As the ice flowers were absorbed by the space channel, they were instantly made to be under the control of Samuel. He then used them to attack the demi-holy being, who was immediately frozen on the spot and was turned into an ice sculpture. Nicholas was enraged along with Murphy and the others as a flicker of anger was shown in their eyes. If they let Samuel continue to gain the upper hand, sooner or later he would kill all the members in the alliance of powerful clans. Their thoughts were proven right, because it was what Samuel had intended to do. Meanwhile, back on the other side, the woman and Sword Chen were staring at the sea of fire. The red lotuses were constantly taking shape and after releasing blazing flames, they would disappear. The woman looked more and more furious as it went on repeatedly. She was originally born out of resentment. There was only one goal in her heart, which was to clean the divine land and then to marry Zen to carry forward the bloodline of the Nine Li race. Because of what Samuel did, her plan could no longer succeed. Sword Chen on the side felt the change in the woman's emotion, and he was a little worried. He wondered how terrible it would be if this woman went crazy. She suddenly turned her head. Far away, Samuel's spear of supreme harmony in his hand was continuously moving in the air. He created space channels one after another in the void, pulling out the ice flowers which kept attacking the people in the void. As they were attacked, the members of the alliance of powerful clans fled in all directions. Each one tried to avoid being hit. However, his spear of supreme harmony was powerful. It could almost pierce the space that was infinitely far away. The others couldn't use the grand teleportation in the void, so how could they even escape? Samuel was ruthless. The woman observed and shifted her eyes away. Her gaze fell on Samuel's clone. Samuel's clone was just motionlessly floating in the air with the spear of supreme harmony in his hand, waiting for her orders. Send us there. I'm gonna kill him, the woman then ordered, exasperated. Sword Chen who was beside her was a little confused. Now that Samuel and Nicholas were in a tangled melee, he thought that this should be a perfect opportunity for the woman to order the clones to attack the two girls so that she could control the true demon body. As soon as the woman gave the order, the clone thrust his spear at her. Phew, an invisible space channel appeared to envelop her. The space channel created was wide enough that it didn't just encircle her, but all the clones of Nicholas, Clark and the other holy beings. Die, go to perdition, ha ha ha, the so-called geniuses of powerful clans on the floating islands, in my eyes, are just ants. Go to perdition. Samuel slaughtered at will. Being the target of the oppression, the demi-holy beings and the consummate true gods were scurrying in all directions. They tried their hardest but their speed was no match against the grand teleportation. He could build space channels as he wanted and could send the ice flowers of the blue-eyed girl to anywhere. Every time he struck with his spear, there would be a person being frozen into an ice sculpture. Run this way, Sean yelled as he quickly flew in the air. He felt a space fluctuation behind Walton and Troy. As soon as he uttered the words to remind them, a gust of ice flowers had swept toward them. Troy clenched his teeth in anger. His whole life's power had been fully gathered on his iron hand. But the energy in the ice flowers was too powerful. Even the internal momentum released by holy beings would soon quickly solidify and condense upon clashing against the energy from the ice flowers, not to mention that Troy was only a consummate true god. Walton was already feeling impassioned. Deep in his heart, he was actually planning on going all out. He was already on the verge of destructing his inner world. Even so, he was still a step behind. As soon as the ice flowers touched him, he found that he couldn't use the internal momentum in his inner world and he quickly turned into an ice sculpture. Sean and Rochelle, who stood not far away, looked gloomy, but it didn't give them an excuse of stopping at all. They persisted in surviving, though they knew that if they were targeted by Samuel and were struck by him, they would have no chance of dodging. The members of the alliance of powerful clans died one after another. It was not long after only a few were left. Nicholas and the other holy beings who remained witnessed the scene in despair, their faces darkened even more. Samuel didn't attack the holy beings yet. Instead, he kept on aiming at the consummate true gods and demi-holy beings. "Nicholas, how do you feel now?" Samuel eerily laughed and mocked. "Do you know how I felt when you killed the stone mouse, destroyed the floating island of Ru clan and destroyed my universe?" He wanted the holy beings to taste the pain he had suffered in the past. "Come on, let's fight him, Nicholas," Murphy exclaimed, gritting his teeth. He looked over at her daughter, Rochelle, who was standing far away. There were only a few people in the alliance of powerful clans that had remained. This time, he knew that Samuel would kill his daughter sooner or later. Zeke, who was beside them, couldn't stand it anymore. He stretched out his hands and a long purple jade sword instantly appeared. The long sword shone with an extremely sharp light, and unmistakably was also a supreme treasure of belief. Swish! With the purple jade sword in his hand, Zeke flew in a speed more than 10 times faster. Even though he was far away from Samuel, he reached him in the blink of an eye. The purple jade sword had turned into a huge sword shadow. He fiercely slashed it at Samuel. Will it work? Samuel shook his head. With a slight shake of Spear of Supreme Harmony, he had already disappeared from the spot. The huge sword shadow formed by Zeke's purple jade long sword missed its target. Things got worse when another space channel came towards him. He gritted his teeth and was able to detect the danger. He acted fast and threw the purple jade sword upward. Buzz! Once the purple jade sword was out of his hand, it grew larger in the wind and turned into a huge sword. It had then blocked all the ice flowers above his head. It gave him the time to rush to the other side and helped him escape successfully. However, the purple jade sword thrown upwards was already covered with a layer of ice flowers. It was rendered useless now. After Samuel disappeared from the spot, he reappeared in the space 1,000 feet away. With his current means, it was not difficult for him to eliminate Zeke. It was surely an easy feat for him, and the only person he was still wary of was Nicholas. When he went through Nicholas's memory, he found out some secrets about time. One way or another, he was cautious of any movement from Nicholas. Even after all of this, he noticed that Nicholas hadn't taken any serious move yet. He decided to just ignore him and continued slaughtering. He thought when he killed Troy too, Nicholas would be finally enraged. However, as he was obsessed in killing, he completely ignored another person. He forgot about the woman. As soon as he came out of the space, he felt a space fluctuation behind him. He looked back and saw the woman coming out of a space channel. He was caught off guard as she straightaway pounced at him. Chapter 2402, A Sea of Crimson Magma. The woman charged towards Samuel. With the brown energy gathered in her hand that turned into a long saber, she slashed him in a flash. The strike was quick and fierce, taking Samuel by surprise. It was too late when he realized that the blade had already pricked his skin. The force of primitive fear took over Samuel in an instant, its effect stunning him in place. During this critical moment, he gritted his teeth and activated the Spear of Supreme Harmony. The spear carried him away, leaving a few streaks of blood flowing on the woman's long brown saber. Buzz! In the blink of an eye, Samuel was carried over 10,000 feet away from where he had been. Putting his finger on the wound, he tried to extract the force of primitive fear in his body. Staring at the woman, he shouted, "We are not enemies. Why did you attack me?" Right now, the only thing he feared the most was his clone. The grand teleportation could move the holy beings to any places as they wished, making it impossible for them to kill each other. It was conceivable that Samuel, with the use of his Spear of Supreme Harmony, had gotten the edge on the others. In the past, he couldn't resist so many holy beings, but now he was able to make the two girls his best weapons. The only problem was, his clone also had a Spear of Supreme Harmony. Staring coldly at Samuel from far away, the woman called out, "You shouldn't have killed Zen. Zen. Samuel was a little surprised. Although the woman had always protected Zen, he didn't think he was important. After thinking for a moment, he replied, Zen is just another consummate true god. Why should I care if he dies? Just now, more than a dozen consummate true gods were already killed by Samuel. The woman couldn't hide the anger flashing on her face upon hearing Samuel's answer. For you, he may just be an ordinary consummate true god, but for me, he is very important. The next second, Samuel's clone stretched out his arm, waving his spear of supreme harmony. From not so far away, an arc-shaped space channel was shrouded in ice flowers. With a thud sound, those fatal ice flowers spread along the space channel to cover Samuel. Noticing that the situation was unfavorable for him, Samuel immediately activated the Spear of Supreme Harmony again, disappearing from his current position. As soon as he appeared again, he continued, I control the secret of the reincarnation. If you give me enough time, I will be able to find Zen's memory flame. If you stop attacking me, I promise to bring him back to life. Samuel was no longer fully confident that he would win, so he tried to sue for peace. But the woman shook her head and replied, what I want is Zen's blood, not his memories. Now that he's dead, the Nine Li race has no descendants. The Nine Li race's blood. A bitter taste rose from Samuel's throat as he didn't expect that this woman would care about it so much. Nicholas's eyes flashed. Clasping his hands, he said in a clear voice, you're wrong. There is still one descendant of the Nine Li race left in the Divine Land. Even if Zen is dead now, the Nine Li race still has another descendant. What do you mean? The woman seemed confused. She turned her eyes to Nicholas, waiting for an explanation. Nicholas answered, a member of the Nine Li race is still alive. Who? She asked again. Pointing at Samuel, Nicholas suggested with a grin, let's work together to kill him before we discuss it. What do you think? He thought that this could be an opportunity. But he couldn't tell this woman about Lorena. Although he had treated Lorena with great respect in the past years, Lorena had always been cold to him. This woman appeared to be so loyal to the Nine Li race. It was likely to bring more trouble if Nicholas told her about Lorena now. The woman looked suspiciously at Nicholas. Although she did not completely trust him, she saw hope knock on her door. As she couldn't leave the Abyss Demon region for so many years, perhaps there were some news that she did not know of. Maybe the situation of Nine Li race was not what she had imagined. Anyway, she must kill Samuel. Samuel's clone, who now stood behind her, brandished the Spear of Supreme Harmony in his hand, creating several space channels. Some of these space channels directly enveloped the other holy beings' clones, while some were connected to the blue-eyed girl. Seeing what was happening, Samuel's eyes froze. He then quickly thrust out the Spear of Supreme Harmony in his hand. Swish, 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 he just made the space within dozens of miles in the void abnormally complicated. Some space channels led directly to the ice flowers or the sea of fire, while some people were flying in others. Samuel, the woman and the holy being's clones appeared every once in a while but then disappeared weirdly. Their movements were too swift for the naked eye to see. Although the two sides hadn't fought yet, everyone had that strange feeling of an impending crisis. Two holy beings' clones, who entered the space channel, fell into the sea of fire on the other side. After being wrapped by the red lotuses, they were finally burnt to ashes. Now, it was Nicholas and his group's turn to watch the fight on the sidelines. The sea of fire raged continuously. Each of the red lotuses blossomed into blazing flames one after another. The red-eyed girl floated in the flames, staring at the scene not far away with her big eyes. Watching the scene drew all her curiosity. She could see Zen's body bathed in a golden light. The golden vortexes enveloped all the flames released by the red lotuses. Aren't you my food? The red-eyed girl asked. In her perspective, all the things in this world could be converted into energy, which she could then accelerate to the extreme to make the beautiful red lotuses. There shouldn't be any exception in the entire Divine Land. Also, she was born to do this. However, before she left her home, she saw an exception, this young man in front of her. He was shining with golden light, unafraid of the red lotuses. Instead, he was eating them. The red-eyed girl could not obtain external information. Since her intelligence was only made up from fragmented information, she made her strange judgment just by watching Zen. Why are you swallowing these red lotuses? Are we of the same kind? She asked, confused. Zen did not seem to hear her. Being burnt by the fire, the Sanskrit words started a magical reaction again. He then found himself in the sea. It was a sea of crimson magma. The sea undulated in front of Zen, sending off mysterious auras. He stared at it and wondered, these auras seem very similar to the truth of godly way. But at the same time, they are quite different. Am I at the sea of truth? Zen shook his head. Back when he was cultivating the truth of cultivation nature, he could vaguely sense the existence of the sea of truth. With that being said, he had a completely different perception of how the sea of truth would be like. It wasn't the same as the one right in front of him now. Chapter 2403, Drifting in the Sea. But if it wasn't the sea of truth, then what was it? In the void, Zen was still trapped by the red lotuses. In the beginning, he thought it was his end. As he had seen that Clark was burnt by the flames released by red lotuses, there was no reason to believe he would survive. He didn't expect that the golden Sanskrit words on his body lit up at an unprecedented speed. But this time, the situation was slightly different from the usual. As he continued to absorb the flames released by the red lotuses, his 5 senses suddenly disappeared. He realized that he could no longer see or hear anything, as if his soul had completely left his body. By the time he regained his consciousness, he was already in this crimson sea. Splash! He could hear the sound of his body as it plunged into the sea. Strangely, he felt no pain when he soaked in the magma sea. But every time he tried to move, he felt an indescribable pain from inside his body. What is this place? Wanting to leave the crimson sea and head for the sky, Zen tried to use his internal momentum. Splash! Jumping out of the water, he was determined to leave the sea. Just then, he felt the magma sea pulled on him firmly, as if it had a life of its own. I can't get rid of it. Surprised, Zen's eyes widened. The magma turned into sticky glue, and he was stuck. Plop! After some standoff, Zen fell into the magma sea again. Soon, he also discovered that he would stay afloat even if he didn't swim. There was a strange buoyant force keeping him on the surface, so he didn't have to make any efforts to swim his way above the water. Those brain masters were wrong. My master is always right. He has never made any mistake. During that moment, Zen heard number 9527 talking in his mind. No, 9527. Zen abruptly rolled around the sea. He could feel a nauseous wave of pain breaking over him as long as he moved slightly on the sea. Hearing No 9527's voice, Zen was so excited that he forgot how his body ached. His body was now swollen, and he couldn't help but cry out. Where are you? Zen asked again, hoping he would get a response. He already realized that No 9527's consciousness came from his deep brain, not from his chest. I'm still inside your body, number 9527 answered. What has happened to me? Why did my soul leave my body? Zen found a whole line of questions he needed to ask. No, it's not like that, number 9527 replied. It is more like your body that left. What? My body left? How could that be? Zen's curiosity grew as that was not the answer he was expecting. As far as he knew, one's soul could leave through acupoints. But now he was being told that his body was the one who left his soul. How was that even possible? It's just a metaphor, number 9527 clarified. Where am I? Am I at the sea of truth? Zen raised another question, confused. Yes, you are at the sea of truth, number 9527 confirmed Zen's guess. But this is not a normal sea of truth. It's likely that no one has stepped into this sea of truth for many years. Splash, splash, an ancient aura covered the crimson magma sea. Looking at the boundless sea of truth, Zen felt like he was as tiny as dust. Only those practicing the ancient god cultivation method can step into this sea of truth, right? Figuring out what number 9527 meant, Zen asked to confirm. Timotheus once told him that the cultivation method of the ancient gods was about absorbing the wild bones and cultivating the wild god system. And the ancient gods could also cross the sea of truth and reach the other shore realm. Yes, number 9527 responded quickly. But there are so many warriors practicing the wild god system at the bottom of the chaos. Even those powerhouses who have reached the other shore realm also absorb the wild bones for body refining. How come none of the wild gods has been able to step into the sea of truth even after so many years? Zen asked. He previously asked Timotheus about it, but he didn't get an exact answer. Number 9527 paused for a while, as if it was thinking. After a while, it replied, the truth has been altered. As a result, it is impossible to enter the sea of truth just by absorbing the wild bones. However, my master said that you were an exception. No 9527's master, known as the Chaos Ancient God, had previously chosen numerous targets in the prison built by Herbert, but none of them had passed the test before. Surprisingly, it was Zen, an outsider, who was able to pass the test in the end. They considered it a coincidence. Do you think it is because of my body refining skill? Giving it a thought, Zen was personally curious to know why. I guess so, answered number 9527 with a slight smile. Although I'm a part of my master's soul, I really have no idea on what he thought exactly. But now it appears that his judgment is absolutely right. You've already taken the first step in the sea of truth. Number 9527 explained everything so calmly, but Zen could hear the excitement coming from its voice now. In No 9527's perspective, Zen was still a nobody, but he had a special characteristic which made him different from any other persons. Splash! All of a sudden, Zen started hearing the sound of waves. From where he was at, he could see an indistinct shadow of a small boat rowing on the sea of truth. A shadowy figure was standing on the head of the boat. The boat emitted a strong truth of eternal sword intent, which Reinhardt of the Sword Clan had used before, if Zen remembered it correctly. What kind of boat is that? Zen asked, looking back. That is the truth boat that crosses the sea. I think it won't be long before you also take the same path, number 9527 answered. According to the Grand World Cultivation Method, Zen needed to reach the limit of godly way, grasp the truth of godly way, make a truth boat, and cross the sea of truth. Splash, splash, splash. Several other truth boats appeared. Their indistinct shadows all sailed on the sea of truth. Why are so many people crossing the sea of truth? Astonishment was written all over Zen's face. According to the information he got from Timotheus, Emily and the others, there were a lot of powerful warriors at the other shore realm in the source world, which meant many people had crossed the sea of truth. However, Zen couldn't imagine that there would be more than 10 people sailing on the sea of truth in such a short time. After thinking about it for a while, number 9527 concluded, it's a bit strange. Maybe the disciples of some great force in the source world are trying to reach the other shore realm at the same time. At that moment, one of the boats seemed to come a bit closer to where he was. The shadow on the truth boat suddenly shouted, "Look! Look! I can see someone in the water." His loud voice was transmitted far away on the sea. Soon, the people on the other truth boats who heard him instantly turned their gazes at the same direction. There's someone floating in the sea of truth. Stop talking nonsense. Wait, what the? Seeing Zen's figure in the sea, another man was stunned and was lost for words. Is he planning to cross the sea of truth with his physical body? I have never heard of anything like that. It's so, the shadow on another truth boat commented in an incredible voice. Number 9527 was right. This group of people, currently sailing, were disciples of the Oneness Sky Palace. This time, the Oneness Sky Palace opened the Sword Sky Road for its disciples to comprehend. Out of the 490,000 inner disciples who embarked on the Sky Road, only 16 had mastered the truth of eternal sword intent, made their own truth boats and sailed towards the other shore. They could not see each other's real appearances but could see each other's vague shadows and hear each other's voices as they sailed across the sea of truth. Unlike Zen's perception of the sea being a crimson magma, these disciples perceived the sea of truth as a brilliant sea of stars. Chapter 2404, The Broken Boat. These 16 disciples from the Oneness Sky Palace were known to be strong. They were the ones who stood out in the Sky Road. It was the first time that their souls of light had left their bodies to wander in the sea of truth. They had cultivated their souls into souls of light and had already built their truth boats, but it was not easy to sail on the sea of truth. Just the wind from the sea of truth alone would make many people's souls tremble. 10 of the 16 warriors' souls lay down on the boats without even raising their heads. The pressure was heavy and they could not stand the wind blowing from the sea of truth. While the remaining 6 warriors appeared fearless and boldly stood at the bow of their boats. They were at the top among their group. If they developed in the future, they would become the pride of the Oneness Sky Palace in the future. Stanley, can you see clearly where this person comes from? He is floating still on the sea. Is he dead? A girl's beautiful voice rang out from a boat. Stanley Ming stared at the figure in the sea and frowned, his hands behind his back. Hearing the question from the woman, he immediately shook his head. It's impossible. The sea of truth can destroy any soul. Even if one's soul has reached the soul of light, their soul would be gone once it falls into the sea. If they are dead, then how can there be any corpses? Everyone entered the sea of truth in the form of soul. How could there be a corpse? Wasn't it absurd? He wanted to see the features of the person in the sea, but he couldn't even clearly see his companions in the sea of truth. He could only recognize the girl through her voice. So it was a wishful thinking for him to make out the figure's appearance. Zen floated in the sea of truth and did not say anything, but the people's conversations clearly reached his ears. Looking at their perfect truth boats, Zen was a little envious. If he could fully grasp the truth of cultivation nature, he assumed that he would also be able to create such a boat. Ha ha, Sophia, if you want to know whether this guy is alive or not, why not just test it out? A robust figure suggested as he laughed. Hearing this, Sophia kept silent and did not respond. The robust man had an extraordinary background and enjoyed privileges in the Oneness Sky Palace. He had already been pestering her a lot these days. Stanley Ming had a cautious look on his face. He said to the robust man, "Terrence, don't do anything stupid. Don't forget why we are here in the first place." Even in the source world, crossing the sea of truth was not an easy task. At this moment, they had just set out and taken the initial step. The closer they were to the other shore, the greater the challenges they would encounter. Seeing that Terrence Shi was going to mess around, Stanley Ming immediately gave out a warning in order to stop him from making any trouble. However, Terrence Shi wasn't taking his warning seriously. It was true that he was a warrior valued by the Oneness Sky Palace, but Terrence Shi was not any weaker than him when it came to talent. In addition, Terrence Shi had a prominent family background which was far superior to his. "Don't worry, there won't be any problem to test him." As he spoke, a triangular secret seal was formed above his robust figure. Since he was now in the form of his soul, he could only use the soul attack. The triangular secret seal hovered over the boat for a while and shot towards Zen, who was in the sea of truth. Seeing the daring move, Stanley Ming couldn't help but shake his head. This Terrence Shi had always been so reckless. Their master had told them to be careful when they crossed the sea of truth, and if they were careless, their souls might shatter. Furthermore, their master gave each of the 16 warriors an illusion-breaking rune. If the time came where they sensed that they were in danger, they could crush the illusion-breaking rune and retreat from the sea of truth. Zen didn't mind the group of people on the boats and just floated on the sea quite at ease. He did not expect that someone would make trouble for him. Soul attack, go to perdition. Zen sensed the incoming attack and sneered. He raised his eyebrows slightly. He had already detected that the group's cultivation base was only at the consummation of true God realm at best, but their soul power would be considered outstanding if they were in the divine land. Their soul power was even on par with that of some demi-holy beings. With his current soul level, the situation felt like a child's play. He wouldn't lose even he was to contend against holy beings' souls. How could the soul attack from the consummate true God possibly pose any threat to him? He opened his eyes and a light gleamed in his eyes. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Soul arrows shot out one after another. Da-da-da. The secret soul technique that Terrence Shi cultivated was also one of the best. The triangular secret seal actually withstood Zen's soul attack. It did hold out against the attack for a moment, but the soul arrows released by Zen didn't stop like a river and constantly flew. The triangular secret seal was able to withstand the attacks of dozens of soul arrows. But when hundreds of soul arrows shot at it constantly, it had suddenly split into pieces and scattered in the sea of truth, disappearing without a trace. Looking at the scene, Stanley Ming and Sophia were shocked. Not only was this guy in the sea of truth alive, but his soul attack was also so powerful. Terrence Shi looked at Zen's figure with a look of disbelief. In terms of pure strength, he was not the strongest in the Oneness Sky Palace and slightly weaker than Stanley Ming. However, the soul technique he cultivated was not an ordinary method. Among the consummate true gods, he had never encountered an opponent in this aspect. He would always have the upper hand in a soul-level battle against his peers. It was beyond his expectation that this time as he attacked, his secret seal was destroyed just like that. Just as he was lost in his thought, he heard the loud shout from Sophia and Stanley Ming. "That guy is approaching you. Run, Terrence." Only then did he saw that the figure made a move and swam in the sea. He was moving very fast and coming directly towards his truth boat. He instantly paled as he looked over. He attempted to suppress the fear in his heart and sat cross-legged, activating the truth of godly way to drive his truth boat to go faster. Zen was not lenient and was definitely irritated by the rash attack. As he swam in the magma sea, he felt strong pain. Despite that, he just gritted his teeth and moved very fast, faster than the truth boats. Although Terrence Shi had made great effort to make his boat move faster, the driving power of the truth boat depended solely on his will. No matter how hard he tried, it was still not fast enough. In the blink of an eye, Zen had caught up with him. Bang! Zen threw a punch towards his truth boat without a word of warning. The truth boat was an illusion formed by relying on truth of godly way. It was as fragile as glass in front of Zen's physical body. His punch had easily created a hole in the truth boat. As a result, the small truth boat quickly tilted and fell towards the sea of truth. Terence She on the boat was scared out of wits as he didn't know what to do. If the boat fell into the sea of truth, his soul of light would dissolve into nothingness. He would be done for. He was still in panic until he heard Stanley Ming shout, "Hurry up! Crush the illusion-breaking rune." Hearing Stanley's words, he was immediately reminded about their way of escape in times of danger. He hurriedly brought out the illusion-breaking rune he had and crushed it with all his might. Before completely falling into the sea of truth, he disappeared in front of Zen along with his boat. Chapter 2405, The Oneness Sky Palace. A milky white bright moon hung over the top of the Oneness Sky Palace. Looking down from the sky road above, one could see tens of thousands of mountains penetrating into the clouds. Every mountain was likened to a towering sharp sword. On the tip of each mountain were significant words engraved on it. Together, these words would be read as, "Truth of Eternal Sword Intent." Every year in the early spring, the inner disciples of the Oneness Sky Palace would have the opportunity to observe from the sky road above. It was the day they would study and comprehend the truth of eternal sword intent. While they observed, the masters would give enlightenment and teach them about its main points. The disciples depended on their abilities to grasp the teachings. Those with talent and great luck would be able to come out on top in this period of time. Once an inner disciple had fully grasped the truth of eternal sword intent, and at the same time had successfully stepped into the sea of truth, they would certainly get the attention of the Oneness Sky Palace. Currently at this moment, over 400,000 inner disciples were still trying their hardest to understand the words. They were focused on their own ways to study the words as they persisted to hold on. Some were chanting and some stood with their eyes open wide. Plop, plop. Understanding the truth of godly way by force would put a lot of pressure on the soul. Although the inner disciples had become consummate true gods and had the soul of light, they still couldn't bear the pressure of the truth of eternal sword intent. As a result, their bodies gave way as they rolled their eyes and fainted on the ground. Whoosh, whoosh, some Taoist priests in cyan robes flew and came over. They carried the fainted inner disciples out of the ring. At the front end of the sky road, there were 16 inner disciples who were quietly seated. They had successfully built their truth boats and sailed on the sea of truth. Unlike the over 400,000 inner disciples, they had taken a big step forward. They were considered as an inspiration as other inner disciples constantly looked at them from time to time, their eyes full of admiration. Alas, I have been here for 36 years. In the very first year when Stanley and Terence set foot on the sky road, they went to the sea of truth. But for us, it appears as distant as ever. A middle-aged man wearing a scarf sighed as he spoke. There are some people that we can't compare with. Stanley is talented, and Terence is out of the ordinary. We have to work harder, another man said helplessly. I wonder how far they can reach when they go to the sea for the first time. It will take at least 3 to 5 days. Before the middle-aged man could finish his words, he heard a sudden plop. Terence, who was seated on the front, fell to the ground. What? Questions had arose. Many people were originally paying attention to Terence, and upon seeing this scene, they immediately screamed. What happened? Terence has failed. He has just entered the sea of truth. It's impossible. Is there anything wrong? On the high platform behind the sky road, an old man with white beard also saw what happened. He frowned slightly, flew up, and landed beside Terence. He slightly shook the horsetail whisk in his hand, and then he put his hand on Terence's chest. He closed his eyes and thought for a while. With a slight pull of his old finger, Terence screamed and woke up. You guys just entered the sea of truth. Why did you use the illusion-breaking rune? What happened? The old man asked with concern. He was the one who gave the illusion-breaking runes to the disciples before they went to the sea. It was a rule to follow in the Oneness Sky Palace. It was already known that the journey to the sea of truth was not calm and peaceful. Sometimes they would encounter big storms or even maelstroms. If the disciples couldn't withdraw from the sea of truth in time before their truth boats were destroyed, their souls would be scattered into pieces as soon as they fell into the water. The illusion-breaking rune would be needed at this time. If they crushed it, their souls would be pulled back to reality from the sea. At this critical moment, the illusion-breaking rune was a life-saving straw. As soon as Terence woke up and saw the old man, he cried out in pain, Master, we met a monster. The old man was slightly stunned. He asked, What monster? Did you make a mistake? For a moment, he doubted. It was normal for some disciples who had just entered the sea of truth to have illusions because their souls couldn't withstand the pressure from the sea. Absolutely no, Terence insisted in an angry tone. I saw him with my own eyes. He didn't have a truth boat. He just wandered in the sea of truth. I wanted to check his strength, but I didn't expect him to smash my truth boat. Therefore, I had no choice but to use the illusion-breaking rune. He continued and narrated what happened. He didn't have a truth boat. The old man's eyes narrowed, and asked, he just wandered in the sea of truth with his soul. Yes, Terence answered with certainty. The old man paused for a moment before he spoke with a cold smile. Terence, although you have a powerful background, it means nothing in the Oneness Sky Palace. I guide you in cultivation because you have outstanding talent. Why do you lie to me? Hearing what the old man said, Terence got anxious. Master, I'm not lying to you. I'm not the only one who saw that man. Sophia and Stanley also saw him. If you don't believe me, you can ask them after they leave the Sea of Truth. If I tell a lie, I'm willing to receive any punishment from the Oneness Sky Palace. The old man was taken aback at how Terence acted in certainty. He was a little bit confused after hearing what he said. It was indeed not an easy task to cross the Sea of Truth. He knew that it was a long and difficult process. Why was the Sea of Truth so dangerous? It was because all the souls could be engulfed by it. Even the old man's soul was no exception. It was common sense, so he didn't trust Terence no matter what he said. Okay, let's wait for their return. Back in the Sea of Truth, Stanley and the others were still watching the scene, cursing Terence in their hearts. If Zen vented his anger on them, he would destroy their truth boats. It might be troublesome, but since they had already mastered the truth of eternal sword intent, it was not difficult for them to condense other truth boats. None of them dared and wanted to provoke Zen, so they all kept their silence. I didn't make things difficult for you, but he gave me problems. I have every reason to smash his boat, right? Zen flatly said as he turned his attention to the group. He was still soaked in the sea. The group heard him but didn't respond. Stanley heaved a sigh of relief, and then hurriedly bowed to Zen. Yes, sir. Terence shouldn't have been so reckless. His boat was smashed. He deserved it. Right, Terence is usually a rude man. He deserved the punishment from you. Sophia chimed in. Although Zen could not see the faces of these people, he could roughly sense that they should also be consummate true gods. Feeling their sincerity in treating him respectfully, he couldn't help a suppressed giggle. Number 9527 told him a reminder to not expose himself. In order to do so, he didn't want to talk to them too much, so he waved his hand and said, "Okay, you can go now." Hearing his words, Stanley and the others felt relieved as they were not to be implicated anymore. Every one of them hurriedly sat cross-legged and meditated. They urged their truth boats to move on the Sea of Truth. Their journey continued. Chapter 2406, Zen's Return. Watching the truth boats leave, Zen began to swim slowly. Alas, unfortunately, the Sea of Truth cannot hide people. You will soon be found, number 9527 declared, heaving a deep sigh. Why do I need to hide? Zen asked curiously. After staying in the Sea of Truth for a while, Zen had met over 10 warriors, which meant there were many people crossing the Sea of Truth. You still don't know what it means to roam in the Sea of Truth with the physical body, number 9527 explained. It won't be long before people in the entire source world start discussing about this matter. Fortunately, they can't trace who you are unless you tell them. Remember that, otherwise, you will have endless troubles. Zen nodded slightly, acknowledging its advice. Although he knew nothing about the source world, he knew that the Nine-Li race was in a dangerous situation. Since his identity was so sensitive, he must be very careful about divulging information. Splash. Looking out of the sea, he asked, "How wide is the Sea of Truth? Do you know how long it will take to get across?" How long? Number 9527 repeated, thinking. Travel time varies among people. Some might need several thousand years, or even over 1 million years, while some people might be able to cross the sea in just half a year. This is still a matter of talent and opportunity. As a matter of fact, the Sea of Truth did not have a fixed width. For some people, it was probably impossible to cross it within their lifetime, but some people would be able to reach the other shore on the first try. What about me? Zen queried. The Sea of Truth is divided into 9 sections. I suggest that you try and see if you can make it through the first section, number 9527 replied. Zen nodded, his expression reflecting his hesitation. But I'm afraid the time is not enough. He did not forget that he was still in the void at the bottom of the ice coffin. Meanwhile, those holy beings were still fighting fiercely. If he spent too much time here, who knew what would happen in the void? Don't worry, number 9527 said indifferently. The time flow rate in the Sea of Truth is different from that of the outside world. Generally speaking, the smaller the world was, the slower the time flow rate would be. This was one of the truths in the chaos. For the same reason, time ran extremely slow in the chaos. The time flow rate in the Sea of Truth was slower than that in the source world. On the other hand, the time flow rate in the Divine Land was faster than that in the Sea of Truth and the source world. The time flow rate in the universe was extremely fast, while the time flow rate in a consummate true God's inner world was even faster. The time flow rate within a Soul Sea Realm warrior's inner world was extremely fast, and everything developed in a blink of eye. Zen nodded, lowering his head to swim. Waving his arms faster, he sped up. Galloping in the sea like a flying fish, he rapidly advanced, leaving behind a series of long and narrow ripples. Soon, Zen was able to catch up with the boats that set out ahead of time. When Stanley and the others saw Zen quickly catching up with them, they felt a little nervous. With no intention to attack them, Zen quickly approached the boats, finally leaving them at ease. As her truth boat came closer to Zen, Sophia asked in a crisp voice, "Sir, why don't you have a truth boat?" Zen heard the girl but ignored her. He continued to swim forward. However, who would have thought that Sophia would actually push the truth boat forward? She came to him and asked, "How can your soul wander within the Sea of Truth?" Sophia came from a great clan and enjoyed a high status. Even after she entered the Oneness Sky Palace, she was favored by the elders. Finding that Zen seemed to be a kind person, she kept following behind him. Sophia, seeing that Zen remained silent, Stanley shouted at her, "Don't disturb the master." Stanley knew that it was a taboo to pry into others' secrets. This man swimming in the sea was indeed a kind person, but Stanley was afraid that Sophia would end up offending him. Moreover, Zen just ignored Sophia all the time. After Sophia was called out for her behavior, she felt a little morose. To add to that, Zen started swimming faster than before, making her fall behind after following for a while. Looking at Zen's figure shuttling through the sea, Sophia said to Stanley, "I don't think he is a master. No matter who he is, we should not provoke any conflicts. The less trouble the better." Stanley had always been a diligent learner. Compared with the others, he was more aware of what it meant to swim in the Sea of Truth. As Zen went further on the Sea of Truth, he felt that the magma around him became increasingly thick. Though the heat of the magma didn't cause him any trouble, the feeling of pain started striking him harder. Several hours later, he started feeling numerous sharp thorns stabbing into his body whenever he moved. He knew that the pain was not real. At least, his body wasn't hurt, but the feeling was enough to slow him down. "It's getting more difficult to move forward," Zen said with a frown. "You perform so well," number 9527 announced with a faint smile. "Those guys behind you have almost given up." Far behind Zen, he could see the truth boats slowly moving forward. Sophia, Stanley and the others all gritted their teeth as the boats moved forward. What tested them was not the thick magma sea, but the gusts of wind that could go deep into the soul and even blow away the boats. For most of them, it was their first time to step into the Sea of Truth, so they would have no choice but to leave after suffering for a few days. After swimming another few miles ahead, Zen found a dividing band in front of him. After the magma crossed that band, it turned into dark red. At this point, the pain that Zen felt on his body had reached an unbearable level. He felt that his body went stiff. He had tried his best to activate all his strength, but his body was somewhat disobedient. "Let's stop here," number 9527 said. "Once you pass the first section, the pressure will multiply. Your body will not be able to withstand it. And you will end up dissipating like the soul of light." Zen nodded. Floating on the surface of the sea, he stretched his body, hoping to ease the pressure his physical body had to bear. After a moment, he asked breathlessly, "How can I leave the Sea of Truth?" "I'll teach you," number 9527 said with a grin. It had been said that the Sea of Truth was really illusion. Perhaps there were some special skills required to leave it. After a short while, Zen felt dizzy, his surroundings starting to spin a little. Once again, he saw himself in a sea of fire. His vision regained its focus with the red-eyed girl floating in front of him, her innocent eyes set on him. Chapter 2407, Easier Than Expected. As soon as he saw the girl with red eyes, Zen shrank back almost reflexively. The girl, however, had a warm look on her face and inquired, "Are you awake?" She had been talking to Zen for a while now, but he had not been responding at all. She naively thought that he had fallen asleep. He was amused by her innocence and he almost laughed out loud. But when he thought about how useful she would be to him, his heart skipped a beat. In the Blackwater area, Sword Chen had decided to obtain this supreme treasure of belief together with Zen. He had even helped Zen arrange the sword array and make use of the force of primitive fear in the Blackwater. But Zen had been unexpectedly brought to the Ice Palace by the mysterious woman. And now, the true demon body was so close to him after the chaotic battle. Wasn't it the right time to refine the true demon body? Yes, I'm awake now, replied Zen, playing along. Pleased by his answer, the red-eyed girl asked, "Are you my companion now?" Your companion? Confusion flashed across Zen's eyes. What he had been thinking about was how to refine the true demon body. Back when he had obtained the Jade Seal in the Time Sea, there was no need to refine it. He had become its owner by merely touching it. In fact, the process of refinement had begun from the moment Zen had entered the inner world of the Jade Seal. Everyone who had entered that world had an equal opportunity to obtain the recognition of the Jade Seal. Zen had made it before everyone else, and so it became his. Similarly, did this red-eyed girl seem to be seeking recognition from him too? A smile appeared on Zen's face when this thought popped in his mind. He immediately said, "I'm not afraid of your flames. Do you think I'm your companion?" The red-eyed girl widened her eyes and thought for a while before replying excitedly, "Yes. I think so." And then, Zen continued. The girl tilted her head and thought some more. Finally, she said, "I have very few companions, so I have to cherish every one of them." Her eyes turned a darker shade of red as she spoke. Zen was staring at the girl curiously. Suddenly, he had a strange feeling in his heart. He felt as though his eyes were intensely attracted to the girl. He was simply unable to look away. Then he sensed an innocent soul, which was exactly like the girl's soul. As soon as he felt it, realization dawned on him. Oh, now I understand. Refining the true demon body is not as complicated as we thought. We just need to get the girl's approval, he thought to himself. It was the true demon body's instinct to merge with the person it recognized. However, after the warriors had entered this void, they had immediately started to fight with each other, and all of them had shown a strong hostility towards the true demon body. The girl might have treated the others as food, but her programming was very simple. As long as someone tried to guide and persuade her, it was not that difficult to obtain her approval. However, in that complex situation, it was impossible for anyone to get this chance. It wasn't until Zen was surrounded by the red lotuses and eventually had a chance to spend some alone time with the girl with red eyes that he discovered this. Buzz. Zen's mind was now connected to the girls, and he could feel two peculiar energies. One was from the girl with red eyes, which was able to activate any kind of energy in this world to the hilt. The other energy was from the blue-eyed girl, which was able to bring any kind of energy in the world to a halt. When both these peculiar energies surrounded Zen, he fell into a calm state. As both energies fused, he wondered whether he had gained the approval of the blue-eyed girl as well when he obtained that of the red-eyed girl. Just then, a sharp roar sounded out in the void. Far away from Zen, a battle was taking place and Samuel was fuming with rage. His hands were on his chest. Since the time the mysterious woman had joined the fight, he had been at a constant disadvantage. He had been nearly invincible with the Spear of Supreme Harmony. Even Nicholas had to back off in the face of that spear. However, the woman had also copied his Spear of Supreme Harmony. Add the strength of a dozen cloned holy beings and she became quite a formidable opponent. It was hard for Samuel to fight against this woman. His carelessness had cost him dearly as he was stabbed in the chest by that woman. He crushed a golden pill, which turned into a light golden mist, and was then absorbed by him. Hiss. New flesh began to regrow in the big hole in his chest and his wounds started healing rapidly. I would advise you to stop resisting. That way, you can die a less painful death, the woman said coolly as she stared at Samuel. Although there had been some unexpected situations along the way, she still believed that everything was under control. The only thing that was depressing her was that Zen had been killed by this fellow. She couldn't accept it, so she was demon bent on killing Samuel first. Apparently, Samuel was feeling no less dejected than her. After he received the Stone Mouse's ability, he could read his enemy's memory flames at any time, and that was how he knew what Nicholas and the rest had been thinking. But this woman, as well as the replicas she had created, had no memory flames at all. As he could no longer read his enemy's memories, he was naturally at a disadvantage in the battle. Samuel, you are stewing in your own juice. After I return to the floating island, I will definitely wage a war in your universe. I hope your universe will be able to hold on for a few days. Nicholas warned him. He, along with the rest, was content to watch the fight from a distance. When he saw that Samuel was losing, he provoked him on purpose. If Samuel was defeated in a universal war, it would be the end of him. Maybe Samuel could be reincarnated and make another comeback one day, but before that, Nicholas would definitely solve the secret of reincarnation and kill him forever. Humph, if I am killed, do you think you'll have a chance to survive? Don't forget her purpose for coming here. Before Samuel could finish his sentence, a fluctuation in space appeared above him. The woman had already launched her attack again. Samuel brandished the spear of supreme harmony and disappeared immediately. He had fought over 1,000 rounds with that woman before. He just kept fleeing into space. So it was never an easy feat to kill him. However, Samuel hated to keep running like this. If he missed even the slightest detail, he would be gravely injured by this woman. If it continued this way, he would be killed by this woman eventually. He racked his brains for a solution to this deadlock. Whoosh, he used the grand teleportation technique once again and reappeared at the center of the void. His eyes followed a thin line in the void and he spotted the blue-eyed girl in an ice flower. It seemed that the girl was confused by the numerous space channels he had been creating constantly. She stood blankly in the void without moving. Seeing this, a bold idea slowly began to take shape in Samuel's mind. Instead of wasting his time with that woman, why not try to refine this girl? Samuel didn't know the method of refining, but he had no other choice. He believed that at least this was better than fleeing all the way. At this point, he vanished once again before the woman could catch up with him. Whoosh, he reappeared at another spot and pricked the line that connected the two girls using his spear of supreme harmony. Chapter 2408, The Opportunity. Samuel was not certain that he would succeed, but he decided to give it a go. The tip of the spear of supreme harmony had suddenly disappeared, and in no time had integrated with the space. Whoosh, with a swift motion, it moved and as soon as it touched the thin line, the space was cut apart. At this moment, the thin line looked to be dislocated. However, Samuel was a bit dissatisfied with the result as he frowned. Although it seemed that he had cut the blue thin line, the line was still intact. Not enough. Again, he made further calculations on his attack. Since he had made up his mind, there would be no reason to give up. Whoosh, whoosh, as he struck another series of attack, the tip of the spear of supreme harmony had slashed the thin line dozens of times. In the eyes of the crowd, the thin line had already been severely dislocated. The part being cut by Samuel was about 10 feet away, which could be considered already close enough to damage it, but it didn't break. Crack, Samuel thrust out the spear of supreme harmony dozens of times, his eyes widening with anger. The long spear fiercely broke the void. A huge hole with a width of 10 feet instantly appeared in the void. The blue thin line drilled in from one side of the large hole, and then came out from another. The part in the middle had already disappeared. The thin line swayed back and forth on both sides of the hole a few times before finally starting to roll back. Following that, it disappeared in everyone's eyes. Splash! Lying in the sea of fire, Zen was currently absorbing the energy from the two girls. Because of Samuel's action, the blue thin line collapsed. One kind of energy had mysteriously disappeared. He has cut off the line. Cut the line and then we can refine the true demon body. It's a good chance. The consummate true gods were full of fear that they would be killed by Samuel, so they fled a fair distance away from him. When they saw the change in the void, they were tempted and itched to have a go. But they were still rational in the end. They dared not to go forward rashly as they knew how powerful the two girls were, and were even aware that they had to fight Samuel first. Seeing that the thin line was cut off, Samuel was overjoyed. But he was in for a surprise. As he narrowed his eyes, he saw that the girl with blue eyes was already gone. "How dare you steal my thing?" he bellowed and came upon a realization. He realized that the woman had used his clone to move the girl with blue eyes away. Whoosh! A chill suddenly emerged around the woman. Samuel's clone had brought the girl to her. The girl stood blankly in the air, her deep blue eyes filled with anger. She was currently in confusion as she was being brought into many space channels. She had no idea what was going on, but she immediately felt irritated and enraged when she realized that her connection with the red-eyed girl was suddenly cut off. "Why did you do this?" A childish but cold voice was heard. Splash! Ice flowers were rushing out of the blue-eyed girl's body and began to rotate crazily. "This is bad," the woman groaned inwardly. In order to refine the true demon body, she speculated that the line had to be cut off. In turn, it was a mistake on her part. It never occurred to her that the blue-eyed girl would be infuriated. Ice flowers circled frantically around the girl, as if she were a goddess of ice and snow, and any creature that approached her would be frozen and torn apart. Swish! Right before the girl's attack approached them, Samuel's clone acted fast and once again used the Spear of Supreme Harmony to create a space channel. He disappeared together with the woman. But the other holy beings' clones were not that lucky. The moment the ice flowers hit them, they were frozen and turned into human ice sculptures. The attack didn't stop as more ice flowers hit the ice sculptures. They were instantly crushed into pieces. They died just like that and turned into faith energy, which quickly vanished into the thin air in the void. The faith energy had originally been extracted from many fiends and fierce beasts by the woman, and now it was returned to the abyss demon region. Break you into pieces. The blue-eyed girl's indifferent face had become ruthless and full of killing intent. Samuel, along with members of the alliance of the powerful clans, was eager for action, but seeing her powerful strength made them take a step back. Their hearts were beating wildly. If they had rushed to her without thinking, they would have been turned into pieces of ice. Whoosh! The ice flowers were spinning faster and faster, and the impact range became wider. The blue light in the girl's eyes was getting brighter. The turbulent cold air spread quickly in the void, as if a snowy storm was coming. Looking at the ice flowers, some people felt deeply afraid that they would spread to the entire void. Would everyone be killed by the snowstorm? They couldn't do anything as they waited in alert. The pressure in the air was growing intense, but when the light in the girl's eyes reached a certain extent, it rapidly began to fade. All the ice flowers disappeared at the same time. The girl stood still as she looked at her own hands, and tilted her head slightly. Her face showed a thoughtful expression, as if she did not understand what just happened. She's running out of energy. The two girls complement each other. The energy of the blue-eyed girl is from the red-eyed girl. Since the line has been cut off, her energy can't be replenished. Now, we can approach her. Some people from the crowd had understood what was going on, and a few of consummate true gods began to gather around her. Nicholas's eyes lit up at that moment. He turned into a streak of light and rushed away. As the head of the holy beings, he didn't use all his strength after he was trapped in this place because Samuel had suppressed him. He felt aggrieved as he knew that Samuel had the great advantage over the others due to the Spear of Supreme Harmony. And the worst was Samuel was able to pry into his memories, which had greatly limited himself. He had endured for so long and did not make a serious move yet. He had been waiting and planning for the right time and opportunity. Now that he had gotten the chance to refine the blue-eyed girl, how could he let her fall into Samuel's hands? He moved as fast as he could, but yet was still a step behind. No matter how fast he went, he couldn't catch up with the woman and Samuel. Whoosh, whoosh, Samuel and his clone thrust out the Spear of Supreme Harmony almost at the same time, and two space channels enveloped the blue-eyed girl. Crack! Under the collision of the two space channels, a serrated pattern appeared in the void and vanished without a trace. Humph! Samuel swung the Spear of Supreme Harmony to the air. This time he made sure that he would be half a step ahead. He managed to envelop the blue-eyed girl in the space channel and sent her into the void a few dozen miles away. In the distance, Pascal was floating. He was still under Samuel's control and was waiting for the opportunity. Seeing the girl come out of the void, Pascal stepped forward to hug her. Just before he could lay a hand on the girl, a ray of extremely sharp sword radiance flew over from 1,000 feet away. If he didn't retreat in time, he would be cut in half by the sword radiance. Chapter 2409, Unable to attack. The man who launched the sword attack was Rocher. The fight in the void was quite fierce. Rocher knew very well to himself that he couldn't directly fight with the holy beings. Although he had some secret weapon to rely on, he didn't get involved before. Seeing that Samuel used his Spear of Supreme Harmony to slash and almost slaughter everyone, he chose to immediately stay away. He fled a distance away and surprisingly noticed another person. It was Pascal. Since the very beginning, Pascal had never gotten involved with the fights. He quietly stayed far away like a puppet. Rocher observed him further, and an idea formed into his mind. The truth was that the true demon body could only be inherited by a consummate true god. No matter how powerful Samuel was, it would be impossible for him to inherit the true demon body by himself. As for the Han clan, the only person they could rely on was Pascal. Thinking of this, Rocher lurked and stayed near him. The result of the fight was exactly the same as what he had expected. Samuel had successfully obtained the true demon body in the fight. Rocher's plan all along was to precisely choose this timing to attack. Lol. When Nicholas saw this scene, a touch of joy appeared on his face. He didn't expect that Lowell was so vigilant that he had waited by Pascal's side in advance. They knew that Pascal was not himself and was completely controlled by Samuel. Seeing Rocher's sword radiance, Samuel frowned and had to dodge it. He immediately conveyed the idea to Pascal. Pascal was quick to turn around and step back, managing to dodge the slash. Rocher transformed into a beam of light and flew towards the girl with blue eyes, pulling her into his arms. "Go to perdition," Samuel cursed. His face turned cold when he saw Rocher's actions. He stabbed the spear of supreme harmony in his hand in the air. Swish! A space wave spread out. He wanted to pull the blue-eyed girl and Lowell over. However, the woman was at the same time quick to act as well. When Samuel stabbed his spear out, she had also given instructions to his clone to do the same. 2 space waves rushed to Rocher. Crack! The 2 space waves collided against each other and were then neutralized. Rocher knew that he was taking a huge risk, but he had no choice. In the universe, he had to shoulder so many responsibilities. He felt pressured, which made him realize that his future was definitely not optimistic, opposite of what he was hoping for. Since he was already caught up in such a situation, it was not possible to change his fate even though the alliance of the powerful clans had suffered a great loss because of Samuel. Over the years, Rocher's state of mind had changed greatly. He persisted until the end. Either for himself or for Iris, he could not die. He didn't want to die. He only had one goal, and that was to control the Abyss Demon region. If he could do so, perhaps everything would take a favorable turn. How to refine this girl? The blue-eyed girl had used up her energy and could not be refined through the red-eyed girl. But he had no idea what he should do to refine the supreme treasure of belief. Spiritual sense. Almost subconsciously, his spiritual sense had poured into the mind of the blue-eyed girl. As soon as his spiritual sense was poured into her mind, he had sensed that panic and fear were hidden in the young soul of the girl. "Don't be afraid. Calm down. I can protect you." Rocher tried to soothe the blue-eyed girl. He kept his focus, as a crisp sound rang out above his head. The space channel created by Samuel was once again counter-attacked and destroyed by the woman. "You want to possess the true demon body as well. Are you going to let that brat get it?" Samuel quickly spoke, exasperated. The woman sneered, "It's better than letting you get it." The clone beside her was prepared to attack as Samuel was about to thrust out his spear of supreme harmony again. He gritted his teeth in agitation that all his spear attacks had been completely destroyed by the clone. He once again made a move in caution. As the spear of supreme harmony emitted a light, he disappeared from where he was and was about to teleport himself. But the moment he disappeared, the clone thrust his spear into the air. The spear seemed to strike at nothing, but it was proven wrong as a zigzag space crack had suddenly appeared in the void. Soon, Samuel fell from the crack. He glared at the woman as he realized that he couldn't teleport himself. If the woman built a space channel, he would choose to destroy it too at the first time. He suddenly remembered that Pascal was still under his control. He kept his guard against the woman and secretly gave out orders. Whoosh! Back to Rocher, he was entirely focused on refining the girl with blue eyes. Pascal had drawn back, but he could have another chance to attack. Pascal gave a murderous look, and a short silver sword appeared in his hand. 5 elements cracking the air. Pascal forcefully increased his strength. In terms of pure strength, there was a certain gap between him and the ordinary consummate true gods. But now that Samuel was controlling him, the situation was different. The short sword in his hand showed the internal momentum of 5 elements and shot towards the vital parts of Rocher's body. "The true demon body belongs to me. If you dare to snatch it, you have to pay with your life." Samuel sneered in his heart as he watched Rocher's incoming doom. Rocher had already wrapped his arms around the blue-eyed girl. The girl did not have a strong killing intention. She knew little about the world and would be scared at the mere rustle of leaves in the wind, so she counterattacked violently. Moreover, she was powerful enough to cause terrible consequences. "Don't worry, I mean no harm, I will answer all your questions. This world is very beautiful." While comforting the blue-eyed girl, Rocher was still aware of the attack behind him. As Pascal's short sword was getting closer and closer to him, he frowned slightly and his eyes flashed a sharp light. A milky white light rose from the surface of his body. The short sword in Pascal's hand was already at a close distance to Rocher's body, but he strangely discovered that no matter how hard he tried, the sword could not stab Rocher. It seemed like there was an invisible barrier in between. "What's going on?" Samuel was flustered at the change of situation. He was still standing far away and had a puzzled look on his face. At this moment, he had an illusion that Pascal was disobeying his order. As his puppet, how could Pascal disobey his order? "Kill him." Without any clue, Samuel urged further and gave the order in his mind. Pascal had now used both hands to hold the short sword, and fiercely stabbed Rocher's back. The short sword, which flickered with the 5-colored sword radiance, was already only half an inch away from Rocher. But then the tip of the sword desperately shook. In such a short distance, however, no matter how hard Pascal tried, he just couldn't give a blow. It was useless. "Will you protect me?" the blue-eyed girl then spoke after Rocher had carefully soothed her. She felt even more insecure than the red-eyed girl. "Of course I will," Rocher answered with a smile. "That's great." Just then, he felt that the blue-eyed girl opened her heart to him, and at the same time, a unique energy began to blend. A connection was quickly formed between him and the girl. Chapter 2410, Fire Punch. Finally establishing a connection with the blue-eyed girl, Rocher immediately felt her sense of hunger. He felt her thirst for power rapidly growing. Since her connection with the red-eyed girl had been cut off, she was unable to replenish all the energy her body released earlier. Now she was extremely hungry for an energy source. Feeling this emotion, Rocher released the internal momentum from his cinnabar field and passed it to the blue-eyed girl. Buzz! As a blue light flashed from the girl's eyes, the cold ice flowers started spreading out of her body. These ice flowers were transformed by Rocher's internal momentum. Although there weren't many ice flowers that appeared, they were enough to cover both Rocher and her, protecting them from everyone's attack. Pascal, who was controlled by Samuel, tried to stab them with his sword but failed. Seeing the ice flowers surrounding the girl again, he had to ask Pascal to retreat. Rocher had fully taken control of the blue-eyed girl now. Only the red-eyed girl remained unaffected. After the connection between the two girls had been broken, Samuel only needed to make the red-eyed girl release all her energy, and then he could refine her. Shaking the Spear of Supreme Harmony to create a space channel to cover Pascal, Samuel drew him to his side, prompting him to look towards the red-eyed girl's direction. However, he was shocked to see what was happening. It turned out that while Samuel and that woman fought over the blue-eyed girl, some people targeted the red-eyed girl instead, knowing the competition would have less complications. However, the red-eyed girl was now covered by a large sea of red lotuses. No one could really confirm what the situation inside was, just by looking from the outside. The red-eyed girl's energy is now limited. As long as these red lotus flowers are consumed, we may be able to capture her. Rochelle, who was holding 2 short swords in her hands, commented. Her swords began to emit 2 rays of blood light. Whoosh! Both swords flew towards the sea of red lotuses. Splash! These 2 short swords that Rochelle possessed were also ranked at the top among the weapons in the Divine Land. However, as soon as they touched the red lotus flowers, they instantly melted. The murdering godly way's internal momentum contained in the short swords was then transformed into blazing flames by these red lotus flowers. The flames became very formidable at that moment. "Rochelle, let me help you," Murphy shouted, as he came over to help. The Mew clan had already suffered great losses in the Abyss Demon region. Now that Lowell got the true demon body, he would be able to help the alliance of powerful clans retrieve some losses. Moreover, if he could help Rochelle get another true demon body, it would be an even better ending for the alliance of powerful clans. After all, the holy beings did not really die. They could always be reborn in the universes. Of course, many of the consummate true gods and the demi-holy beings died, but the combat power in this stage was of little importance. If the alliance of powerful clans could overcome this difficult situation with the help of 2 true demon bodies and dominate the Divine Land, they would be able to slowly cultivate new demi-holy beings and new consummate true gods in the future. With that all set, even the other powerful clans would submit to them. Buzz! Murphy flew up, a black sword appearing in his hand. Before Samuel could realize what happened, Murphy planned to take the true demon body out of the flames. Spirit Annihilating Sword. Murphy's long black sword was suddenly brandished. A ray of black light spread out of its blade, cutting towards the red lotus flowers. When the sword's radiance touched the red lotus flowers, they began to devour each other. By the time the sword's radiance was extinguished, the red lotus flowers became dimmer. While Murphy was watching this scene, a faint smile appeared on his face. He knew that these red lotus flowers could turn all the energy into flames, and using any other methods to attack would only cause more trouble. Like the red lotus, his spirit annihilating sword needed to devour other energy for it to grow stronger. After these 2 forces had collided, half of the red fire had vanished. Without thinking twice, he wielded the spirit annihilating sword to launch a second strike. However, a space channel pierced through the distant space like a flying bird after Murphy finished his attack, directly enveloping his sword strike. The radiance of the spirit annihilating sword was transferred to another void. Whoosh! Whoosh! Samuel, his duplicate and the woman suddenly appeared around the red lotus flowers. The blue-eyed girl had already been controlled by Rocher. If this woman wanted to leave the Abyss Demon region, the red-eyed girl would be her last resort. Thus, she would definitely not allow anyone else to control her. On the other hand, Samuel was also eager to get the true demon body. Seeing these two people approaching, Rochelle and several other consummate true gods looked scared. They decided to step back and hide behind Murphy. "You and your daughter have no right to compete with me. Murphy, get out of my way," Samuel said coldly. But Murphy didn't give in to his request. Samuel became awesome because his spear of supreme harmony could break through space. Combined with the girl's ice flowers and red lotus flowers, it became invincible. With its power, other holy beings were unable to defeat him at all. But the situation now was different. After the connection between the two girls had been cut off, the red lotus flowers became constantly weak. If this continued, the red lotus flowers produced by the red-eyed girl might disappear completely. Even if Samuel relied on the spear of supreme harmony, Murphy had the strength to fight against him. Moreover, Murphy knew that Nicholas would help and support him. "You are the one who should get out of here." The woman smiled faintly. Flicking her fingertips, she turned the wisps of brown energy into many slender short swords. At the same time, Samuel's duplicate stood behind her and thrust his spear, making a space channel appear and pierce towards Samuel. As a result, the short swords were sent over through the space channel. Shocked, Samuel had no choice but to activate the spear of supreme harmony and fight. The two fought fiercely. Murphy felt pleased while watching. He jumped up and floated in the sky above the red lotus flowers, quickly extracting the internal momentum in his body. Swish! Swinging the spirit-annihilating sword, he launched another attack. This time, the sword attack was more powerful than the previous one, as he was determined to annihilate all these red lotus flowers. The sword shot from the top towards the bottom. The blade cut through the red lotus flowers below, but suddenly a strange phenomenon appeared. All of a sudden, the red lotus flowers gathered together and burned. They all turned into bones. The flames then transformed into blood and flesh, forming a huge fist. Bang! The burning air surged up, instantly swallowing up the radiance released by Murphy's spirit-annihilating sword, and smashed against him at the same time. "What's this?" Murphy's eyes were filled with astonishment, as he knew that getting hit by this punch might cost him his life. As he retreated, he employed many complicated techniques. Chapter 2411, A New Path. As Murphy had continuously fired out many complicated spells, the black sword that he held in his hand flashed once. Not long after, a black crystal shield had been formed before Murphy's body. Bang! The shield had intercepted the huge fire fist that had been rapidly rushing towards Murphy. After a few moments, the crystal shield shattered and disappeared after it had merged with the fire. The crystal shield had somehow reduced the flames, power, and the huge fire fist immediately shrunk to about a tenth of its original size. Murphy had kept casting his spells with a dire expression on his face. After the first crystal shield had disappeared, the black sword in his hand flashed again, and instantly, another black crystal shield materialized in front of him. Bang! The second crystal shield had been smashed to pieces immediately as soon as it was formed. The same thing happened to the third, fourth, fifth. The crystal shields hadn't been able to withstand the impact of the fire fist at all, but at least they had been able to shrink the fire fist bit by bit every time they intercepted it. Murphy had to condense these crystal shields, otherwise, he was the one who took damage. His body wouldn't have been able to survive the impact if he had been directly hit by the fire fist. The only thing he had been able to do was give his full force in an attempt to put out the flames. As the spirit-annihilating sword's power was used in such a way, it sapped a great deal of Murphy's energy. More black crystal shields were released continuously, and the strain of this effort was evident on Murphy's face, which had turned deathly pale. When he was near his power's limit, he bit the tip of his tongue and spat a mouthful of blood essence onto the spirit-annihilating sword. A dark aura briefly surrounded the surface of the spirit-annihilating sword. Murphy then hurled the sword downwards. Crack! The flames had been finally thoroughly extinguished. Suddenly, in place of the fire fist, there appeared a giant golden fist that steadily grew at an alarming rate. Murphy caught sight of it and his eyes widened in disbelief. Zen, all of the consummate true gods, including Rochelle, had also been taken aback. The power of the fiery red lotuses had been known to all of them. If holy beings had fallen into them, they would be reduced to dust in an instant regardless of how powerful they were. Most people thought that Zen had already died when he fell into the red lotuses. They had been blown out of their minds when he had appeared in such a manner. Splash! Murphy retreated as fast as he was able to. However, there had been very little distance between him and Zen. After Zen had activated the wild god body, his corporeal body had grown up to 50,000 to 60,000 feet. Murphy had done his best to retreat and stay out of Zen's way, but he still had not been able to dodge Zen's mountain-like giant fist. The moment that Murphy collided with Zen's huge fist, a brilliant golden light shone from the surface of the fist. Bang! The collision had produced a crisp reverberating sound, similar to that of a huge gong. A torrent of powerful energy forcibly flowed into his body. It had been Murphy's instinctive reaction to remove this domineering force, but as soon as it had entered his body, it turned into multitudes of little snakes that wreaked havoc in his body. There had been no possible way to remove it. If he hadn't been able to remove this force, it would have torn him apart. In Murphy's desperation, the solution he had thought of was to lure the malicious force into his own inner world. If it were demi-holy beings or consummate true gods who had attempted to do this, it would have been an act of suicide. But Murphy's universe had attached itself to the divine land, and thus it was able to withstand the force. Bang! A huge explosion had opened a gap on the top of the Murphy universe. A golden ray of light transformed into a gleaming sword as it soared down from the skies. It traveled through space over hundreds of millions of miles in a flash. It crumbled the stars along the way into dust and then finally pierced a supreme world in the universe. The supreme world had been cut into two halves before it began to implode. It still wasn't enough to dissipate the power of the domineering force. In the presence of this force, other nearby supreme worlds also collapsed one by one. An infinite number of creatures had perished. The fake sacred race that had invaded the evolutionary universe had suffered the greatest losses. Even though a significant amount of the domineering force's power had already been dispersed into his own universe, Murphy's condition had not been improved. His hair was ruffled and untidy, and cracks had appeared all over his body. He was in despair, and his breathing had become rapid and weak. Is that the truth of godly way? Why, the truth of godly way is from that guy's body. How is that possible? Nicholas, even though he had been standing quite a distance away, wasn't able to hide the shocked expression on his face. He had extensive knowledge of how the truth of godly way worked, which served as the base to reach the other shore. Most of the truths of godly ways depended on the cinnabar fields to help the souls reach the other shore. But Zen's truth of godly way originated from his body, which defied everything in Nicholas's previous experiences. If he hadn't witnessed it with his own two eyes, it would have been impossible for him to believe it. Even Zen thought that there was something different within him. He retracted his fist and looked closely at his hands, scrutinizing the smallest details. He had noticed a few significant improvements in his body after it had been refined by the red lotuses. Buzz. When he had activated his power, a halo of faint golden light radiated from his fist. Is this also a truth of godly way? Zen had mused to himself as he looked wonderingly at the golden light. It required the forging of a truth boat with the truth of godly way if one wanted to reach the other shore. Zen, on the other hand, had been crossing the sea of truth using only his physical body, so the truth of godly way had been completely integrated into his body. It was definitely not the truth of cultivation nature. Of course, Zen heard No 9527's voice come from his chest. You wouldn't have dared to dip your feet into the sea of truth if you hadn't already comprehended the truth of godly way. Is it the ancient god cultivation method that produces this kind of truth of godly way? Zen asked. Over eons, the ancient gods had also only relied on their physical bodies to cross the sea of truth. There was a great probability that they had the same kind of truth of godly way. You may say so, but it's not exactly right. After a bit of hesitation, number 9527 continued, the ancient gods learned the truth of powerful holy body. When the wild gods had cultivated to the maximum level, they were able to master the truth of powerful holy body, cross the sea of truth, and set their feet upon the other shore. Unfortunately, this method hasn't been effective recently. You now possess a unique truth of godly way, different from the ancient gods. Since there had been no way to learn the truth of powerful holy body, and even the ancient god cultivation method had been of no use, it was eventually replaced by the grand world cultivation method. After Zen had achieved the refinement for turning his body into a weapon, he seemed to have triggered an alternative way for body refining. With the assistance of the ancient god cultivation method, he had been able to open up a new path that bypassed the third truth which had been applied to the whole chaos. After Zen consulted number 9527 briefly, he stared at Murphy nearby and told him, in the universe back then, you launched a sword attack on me. If it were not for Estelle, I would have died. Now, I reciprocated your sword attack with this punch. With a gargantuan body, Zen's voice had been quite loud. It spread through the expanse of space, and everyone heard it as though it was thunder. Murphy floated quietly in the open space. Compared to Zen's gigantic body, it was as if he was only as small as an ant even though he was a holy being. He was badly hurt both physically and mentally. Chapter 2412, a fight that would have happened. Only about 20 years had passed since he attacked Zen with his sword strike in Mike's universe. To the holy beings, 20 years were almost negligible in comparison to their long lives. Zen, who had been considered as insignificant as ants by Murphy, had then grown to such a high level. Finally meeting each other once again, the tables had turned. Zen's huge body now made Murphy as insignificant as ants, which was simply ironic. Father. Calling out with concern, Rochelle quickly flew upward and stood protectively before her father. After Zen had returned to the divine land some time earlier, many consummate true gods had witnessed Zen's great strength. At that time, Zen was already able to defeat the consummate true gods with ease, and his strength was comparable to that of a demi-holy being. And with his strength greatly improved once again, even Murphy wasn't able to withstand Zen's punch. He was now so powerful that both the consummate true gods and the demi-holy beings had to look up at him. Apparently, Zen's control over the true demon body had upset the two other people present. One of them was Samuel. Knowing that he cut off the connection between the two girls, he believed that he was more deserving of the true demon body in the ice coffin. Unexpectedly, he ended up with nothing. One of the girls was obtained by Lowell, while the other one belonged to Zen. With this thought in mind, he was especially disgruntled at Zen's luck. Witnessing how Zen was surrounded by red lotuses, everyone believed that he had been burnt to death. However, that was not the case. Samuel couldn't understand how he could have shown up again, safe and sound. On the other hand, the woman was overwhelmed with mixed feelings as well. Her goal was to obtain the true demon body. She had tried countless times, but in the end, all her efforts had turned out to be a paving stone for others. Despite her failure, she felt pleased to learn that Zen was still alive. After all, she was born out of the resentment after the extinction of the Nine Li race. Knowing that Zen had survived, she was pleased that at least one descendant of the Nine Li race would remain. Whoosh! Stretching out his hand, Zen suddenly grabbed Murphy. Surprised, Rochelle gritted her teeth and defended her father by standing before him. But how would she be able to resist Zen now? Puff! A golden light appeared on Zen's huge palm as it collided with Rochelle, slapping her away. Rochelle spat out a mouthful of blood. With Murphy gripped in his hand, Zen's gaze fell on Nicholas, who was standing afar, a glint of anger flashing from his huge eyes. After meeting Sword Chen in this place, Zen couldn't help seeing a glimmer of hope in getting a chance to take his mother back from Nicholas. Through Nicholas's memory flame, it was very clear that Nicholas had brought Lorena with him to the Abyss Demon region. However, with Zen's previous standing, rescuing his mother would have been reckless and irresponsible. Zen had only been able to guarantee his own survival and his safe escape from the Abyss Demon region. The situation had changed now. Merging with the true demon body, he had improved greatly. He would be capable of declaring war with Nicholas now. "Give me my mother back," Zen ordered with a cold voice. "Otherwise, I'll crush him to death." Hearing these words, Nicholas's eyebrows furrowed slightly. "Your mother? What are you talking about?" "I don't know where she is now," Nicholas answered with a blank expression. Zen sneered, "You are the head of the holy beings. Stop playing dumb. This is ridiculous. I know you have brought my mother with you to this place. Do you think it's only Samuel who can read your memories?" Nicholas's face darkened immediately. On top of his status and strength, he had always been proud of his astuteness and wisdom. Learning that Zen was able to probe into his memories, and even his thoughts, he knew that he couldn't keep any secrets from both Zen and Samuel. Of course, Nicholas didn't know how their actual skills worked. In fact, Samuel was only able to read the memories of those around him and his ability was greatly limited. On the other hand, since Zen possessed the reincarnation soul weapon, he was able to read almost everyone's memories throughout the entire divine land. "Release her, or I'll kill him," Zen threatened, waving his giant hand. Murphy had no power to resist him at all. Sneering coldly, Nicholas responded, "Can you really kill him?" The loss Nicholas had suffered in the Abyss Demon region was something he could still afford. After all, these holy beings did not really die. They could be reborn in their universes afterwards. Hearing Nicholas's response, Zen knew what he had to do. The power in his hand surged without reservation. With a golden light flashing, he tightened his grip. Puff! Shortly after, Murphy's body transformed into a cloud of blood in Zen's hand. It was the first time Zen killed a holy being, although everyone knew that Murphy wasn't really dead and he could be reborn. After Murphy's body had exploded into dust, Zen took a wide step and headed straight towards Nicholas. Buzz. The red-eyed girl followed closely behind him. Standing close to Zen, her size seemed almost insignificant and unnoticeable when compared to Zen's. Narrowing his eyes, Samuel stared at the red-eyed girl. He could not reconcile himself to the fact that Zen got the true demon body. Although Zen seemed extremely strong now, his method of attack using merely physical strength still didn't scare Samuel off. He believed that having the Spear of Supreme Harmony in his possession was an advantage. Having Zen and Nicholas fighting fiercely would be a pleasure. Seeing that Zen, who was as huge as a mountain, was coming straight to him, Nicholas's eyes narrowed in concentration. Whoosh! From his palm, the truth of dark and light chaos began to swirl. Creating a huge 8-diagram disc, it then floated above him. Just as they were about to collide with each other, Zen's body suddenly halted. Everyone watching was puzzled, seeing that Zen aggressively approached Nicholas. What would have made him stop all of a sudden? Smiling, Nicholas said, "Sure enough, you can actually peep into my memories." In fact, Nicholas had foreseen what would happen next. As the 8-diagram disc that he summoned was extremely sharp, it should destroy Zen's arm like a spiraling millstone. However, Zen had already seen the same pictures from Nicholas's memory. Theoretically speaking, they had already fought once in the past, future. Since Nicholas had predicted the result, and Zen could read his memory, he had to give up his attack knowing it would be a failure. Therefore, this round of fight, which was supposed to have happened, would no longer be a reality. Frowning slightly, Zen took another step. He chose to attack from the right this time. But halfway through his attack, he suddenly stopped again. This signified a second round of could have been, that didn't come into reality. With a complacent smile, Nicholas said, "Your body seemed to have been refined and enhanced, but you are underestimating me if you think you can defeat me with your physical strength." After all, Nicholas was the head of the holy beings. In the Abyss Demon region where the grand teleportation technique could not be used, the Spear of Supreme Harmony worked to Samuel's great advantage. In addition, the flames and ice created by the two girls had made it easier for him to kill members of the powerful clans. Anyway, it still would not be easy for Samuel or Zen to kill Nicholas easily. From the eyes of their spectators, the fight between Zen and Nicholas that did not happen was so bizarre. The only person who could understand their strange behavior was Samuel, since he was also able to read Nicholas's memory flame. Each time, he could see the pictures of their fight that didn't come into reality. Chapter 2413, Dark Light Word Transformation. Rising up in the sky, Zen paced in the air in this void. But every time he started to attack, he stopped after finishing only half of it. Having fought with Nicholas for 10 times in the future, Zen had also stopped an attack 10 times in a row by now. Each time he kept seeing the scene of his future failure. The 8 diagrams condensed by Nicholas was like an indestructible millstone. It was true that Zen's physical body had improved greatly and he could even travel through the Sea of Truth. However, it was still impossible for him to withstand the 8 diagrams. After 13 attempts, Nicholas closed his eyes, making the light in them fade away. Knowing that Zen could see through his memory, he no longer tried to see the scenes in the future. Smiling faintly, Nicholas said, "Time is a very interesting thing. If I don't let you take a peek into the future, that makes it indefinite. You can attack me now." The scene appearing in Nicholas's visions would surely happen. In other words, once Zen took action, he would definitely lose the fight. But if he stopped looking into the future would be unpredictable. Even though Nicholas said so, Zen still didn't make a move. As he stood there and stared at Nicholas, a hint of hesitation reflected in his eyes. "You dare not," Nicholas teased with a faint smile. He then raised his arm gently. Truth of dark and light chaos slowly flowed out from his hand. Splash! Constantly gathering above Nicholas, the black aura flowed clockwise, while the white one slowly flowed the other way. Since Zen refused to attack, Nicholas would make his move first. In reality, Nicholas was only afraid of the true demon body, together with its demonic red lotuses and cold ice flowers. He knew that the two forms of the true demon body were connected to each other, thus, their energy could be mutually transformed and never be exhausted. This made it invincible. However, after the connection between the two had been cut off by Samuel, Nicholas was given a chance to display his power. Moreover, the other form of true demon body was now in Lowell's hands. As the truth of dark and light chaos continuously flowed, the 8 diagrams floated over Nicholas's head. It became larger and emitted an indescribable aura. The moment everyone felt that aura, Samuel, the woman, Sword Chen, and the remaining holy beings, demi-holy beings and the consummate true gods finally realized Nicholas's real strength. Crack. Raising his head, Nicholas looked at Zen. He stretched out his hand, slightly bending his middle finger, as if he was picking up the stars from the sky. Even though his movements were gentle and slow, his intention to kill was extremely terrifying. Swish. As soon as his finger moved, the 8 diagrams above his head suddenly shook, releasing a strange force across the void to directly attack Zen. How is this possible? Like a mountain that collapsed, Zen's huge body suddenly trembled. In astonishment, he retreated at a crazy speed. Phew. Though he was able to retreat in time, it was not enough for Zen to avoid the attack. A dent marked his chest with a fingerprint that was several hundred feet wide and 3,000 feet long. Despite having a huge and extremely tough body, he still suffered the attack. If it had been any other holy beings, Nicholas would have smashed them into pieces and turned their souls into dust. After forcing Zen to retreat, Nicholas decided to not chase him down. Smiling faintly, his gaze roamed around and fell onto Samuel, who was standing from a distance. Do you think you can control everything as long as you can read my memory? Samuel's face slightly hardened upon hearing Nicholas's question. Holding the spear of supreme harmony tightly, he answered coldly, so what? I may not be your opponent outside, but see, what can you do to me here? He was able to travel through the space freely, so no matter how powerful Nicholas was, he could do nothing to him. I let you do what you wanted because I wanted to use you to break the connection between the two forms of the true demon body, Nicholas announced, and his aura continued to increase. In fact, if you have submitted to me in your previous life, you would have become my right-hand man by now. Unfortunately, you've chosen a wrong path, and going further along this path will always result to a failure. Splash. As soon as Nicholas finished talking, the huge 8 diagrams increased tenfold again. It continued to swell at an incredible speed. At this rate, it would fully occupy the entire void soon. As Nicholas's powerful aura dawned on them, everyone suddenly felt they were becoming extremely insignificant. The world of chaos is formless. Billions of mysteries are born in chaos. They can turn into dark and light energies as well as time. Nicholas, who was floating in the void at this time, seemed to have changed into another person. The aura that he was emitting was unpredictable, as if everything in the world had existed because of him. Is this the strength of Other Shore Realm? Retreating at a distance, Zen looked at this scene in surprise. Stunned, Samuel asked, "You've stepped into the Other Shore Realm?" Nicholas completely ignored Samuel's query. Looking up at the huge 8 diagrams covering the entire void, he muttered, "I've been floating on the sea of truth in the past few years, and I've met countless extraordinary people on the sea. I have met the half-page book's descendant, the Magic Door Tower's elite disciples and many other talents. Even the few with the worst talent have already crossed the 9th section of the Sea of Truth and stepped onto the other shore. I, Nicholas, is the most talented warrior in the Divine Land. I'm still unable to cross the last threshold and reach the other shore. But I made a good friend on the Sea of Truth and he helped me a lot. After the Dark Light World transformation has been passed to me, it enabled me to transform any world and make it for my own use. As a matter of fact, it was not easy to cross the Sea of Truth, even for the geniuses in the Source World. For example, Zen met several inner disciples of the Oneness Sky Palace, but they were still stuck in the first section of the Sea of Truth, and even Zen had not really passed that part. The further it went, the more challenging the journey was. There were some people whose truth boats were destroyed in the Sea of Truth and their souls of light were shattered. The 9th section of the Sea of Truth was the most difficult, which was why more than 90% of true gods were stuck near the 9th section. People who had reached the 9th section of the Sea of Truth were considered to be half-step into the Other Shore Realm. However, there was a world of difference between them and the real masters at the Other Shore Realm. As a rare genius in the Divine Land, Nicholas grabbed the opportunity to make friends with talents in the Source World. The Dark Light World transformation technique had been passed down to him from a friend. However, using this method might also cause him a great harm. It would even affect his truth boat and delay him in crossing the Sea of Truth. If he hadn't been forced to the corner, Nicholas wouldn't have used it. Chapter 2414, Attacked by Shadows. The momentum of this place was almost palpable. Samuel turned deadly pale when he felt the force of the momentum and bore its pressure. He had endured his resentment for Nicholas for many years, right from the floating islands to the Abyss Demon region, and even sacrificed his 3 children for it. Now, he finally found the opportunity to seek revenge in this void. Originally, he thought that he was invincible, so he didn't take Nicholas seriously. Instead, he regarded the woman as his biggest rival. But now it looked like all his schemes and plots were turning out to be extremely ridiculous. Nicholas's power was beyond his imagination. Nicholas, who was floating in the sky, just glanced at him, but he could feel that the whole world was full of disdain for him. He had gone through great pains to be reincarnated and become a holy being again, but Nicholas never took him seriously. Splash! As the 8 diagrams discovered in the void, Nicholas's eyes fell on Zen again. He said, before Mike's death, he managed to cultivate such an outstanding son. Within 100 years, you have reached the consummation of true God realm and have the strength to kill holy beings. Although it's miraculous, I'm not surprised. This is not Mike's contribution, but Lorena's. Nicholas felt calmer after saying these words, but there was a trace of indescribable jealousy in his eyes. If there was any special woman in the divine land, it must be Lorena. Nicholas tried to cross the sea of truth and constantly communicated with the people in the source world, so he had a general understanding of the structure and forces of the whole source world. He was well aware about the importance of the 9 Li race in the source world and Lorena's position in the race. Lorena was without a doubt an excellent woman, so he had never forced her to do anything. He always took good care of her. But today, I will have to personally destroy this miracle, said Nicholas ruefully. He wanted to free Lorena from all the shackles and give her enough time to forget everything. Phew! Nicholas raised his hand slightly and turned it over, and a black and white shadow spread out from behind of him. The shadow suddenly soared to 60,000 feet, about the same height as Zen's current huge body. I don't know how you became so gigantic, but I want to see who is more powerful. As soon as Nicholas uttered these words, he went straight to Zen. The dark light world transformation was similar to the lands of demi-holy beings. But the demi-holy beings built their lands using all of their internal momentum, while the dark light world transformation was built with the truth of dark and light chaos. Whoosh! At the moment, Nicholas was soaring rapidly. Even though there was a lot of distance to cover between him and Zen, he had arrived in front of him in the blink of an eye. At the same time, the huge shadow stretched out its fist and dashed towards Zen. It was known to all that strength and physical body were Zen's greatest allies. However, Nicholas chose to fight head-on with strength. One could imagine just how confident he was of his own strength. Zen blocked the shadow's punch with his strong arms. All he felt was a strong force coming from the punch of the shadow. The force did not emanate from Nicholas's strength source, but from this world. So it was unimaginably strong. Bang! A layer of mysterious golden light glowed on Zen's arms, and his huge body, which was larger than the mountains, retreated at a lightning speed. Meanwhile, there was a sneer on Nicholas's face. He had planned to manipulate the shadow to chase Zen. However, just as he took a step forward to proceed with his plan, something happened that made him narrow his eyes in confusion. The shadow's punch failed to wipe out the golden light that was emitting from Zen's body. Instead, it entered the shadow and rapidly spread towards him. Interesting. Nicholas could also feel the overbearing power of this golden light. Previously, Murphy was badly injured by Zen's punch because of the impact of the golden light. So now, Nicholas was cautious about it. He turned his hands slightly and a stream of dark light torrent gushed towards the golden light. The golden light came from the truth of godly way that Zen had refined with his physical body, while the dark light torrent from Nicholas was formed by the truth of dark and light chaos. Snap! When the two collided, the golden light steadily gained the upper hand, and eroded the dark light torrent completely. Nicholas was taken aback by this turn of events. It was now that he realized that he had underestimated Zen. His body shrank and quickly extracted itself from the huge shadow, leaving the golden light in the shadow. The golden light enveloped the shadow from left to right and destroyed it in just a few seconds. Your strength is strong, but it's just so-so. Zen, who was not far away, smiled faintly. The truth was that Zen himself was shocked by the power of the golden light. He didn't know what kind of truth of godly way was contained in the golden light. It was certainly more powerful than the truth of cultivation nature and the truth of dark and light chaos. Nicholas snorted coldly and said, "You just destroyed a dark and light shadow. What if I summon more of it?" Saying that, he raised his hand again. As the huge 8 diagrams disc above everyone's head began to revolve, many large indistinct shadows began to appear around Zen. The crowd was quite shocked when they saw this army of shadows appearing non-stop. I'm afraid each shadow's strength is even stronger than a holy being's. If Holy Nicholas had chosen to use this power earlier, my father wouldn't have died. Humph, do you think such a powerful method comes without a price? The survivors debated and discussed carefully in the distance. Bang! Zen was not ready when a huge shadow appeared in front of him, so its enormous fist smashed his face. Zen was thrown away by the blow as a golden light exploded. However, this light was produced from the collision and it remained within the body of the shadow, while the domineering golden light quickly tore the latter into pieces. Nicholas seemed unaffected by this. The hefty shadow was torn apart, but even more appeared in its place. Bang, bang, boom. Just as Zen finished dealing with the shadows in front of him, a punch from another shadow had already landed on his back, sides, waist and head. More than a dozen shadows were attacking him together at this point and Zen was beaten black and blue. Seeing this, the woman and Sword Chen exchanged a worried look. No matter how strong Zen's body was, he would not be able to bear such a brutal attack if he was being beaten passively. Chapter 2415, No Way to Escape. Zen's huge body was smashed and thrown into the air. The others immediately retreated to the distance. Regardless if they were hit by Zen's huge body or by the shadows, they would surely be killed. Zen still didn't look hurt. Even number 9527 wasn't able to confirm the state of Zen's body right now. The golden light shone from the surface of his body, but number 9527 also wasn't sure which kind of truth of godly way it belonged to. However, Zen had found a rule. In the past, a trace of primordial energy was being produced when his weapon body was refined, and it actually was from the power of the weapon refiner during the process. Now, as he continuously endured the attacks from the shadows, his physical body seemed to absorb a portion of the power and bounce some power back. The golden light that radiated from his body seemed to be the power that bounced back. But I can't bounce all the power back. The shadows seemed endless. It seemed that the only way to have Nicholas stop was for them to break Zen's physical body. Initially, Zen could withstand these attacks, but after a while, he started to feel a slight pain. His physical body started to ache, and his wild god body showed signs of instability. Boom, boom, boom. The loud sound echoed as the shadows and his physical body collided. Everyone was left dumbfounded. Nicholas's endless shadows left them wide-eyed, as much as Zen's ability to withstand it with his extraordinary strength. Comparing each shadow to a full blow from a holy being, Zen had so far received over 100 blows from a holy being. However, he appeared to remain unharmed. Could it be because of the true demon body he has inherited? Greedy expressions started reflecting on the spectators' faces. That's impossible. The true demon body only releases red lotus flowers and controls energy. Zen's physical body is extremely terrifying in the first place. How can he be so powerful? Isn't he just a consummate true god? What kind of godly way has he cultivated to such an extent? Don't you remember? Zen had been engulfed by the red lotus flowers but he wasn't burned to death. If you could survive the flames of red lotus flowers, you would have such a strong body too. Though some people couldn't figure out how Zen ended up so powerful, they were smart enough to figure out what happened just by observing. Bang! Another two huge shadows slammed into Zen's chest, as he was pushed forward and rolled over. The shadows being controlled by Nicholas were extremely flexible, and even Zen had difficulty avoiding them. As the two shadows attacked him at the same time, he only felt a sharp pain in his chest. Puff! He spat out a large mouthful of blood, which then turned into golden raindrops fluttering in the air. Zen took a deep breath. Wow! After he used up his wild god power, his figure shrank to normal size in the blink of an eye. Seeing this, Nicholas felt satisfied. The endless appearance of the shadows consumed most of his energy. However, they both tried to hold for as long as they could. Apparently, Zen couldn't hold for too long. You really have an amazing body. I take you seriously all the time. But now, you should go to perdition. As soon as Nicholas finished his remark, one of the huge shadows stretched out and came towards Zen. Earlier, Zen crushed Murphy in front of Nicholas, and now it was his turn. Having dissipated the wild god power, Zen saw the giant hand reaching out to him, but it was too late for him to dodge. Zen. The voice sounded clear as Zen felt that a space wave came towards him, enveloping him afterwards. He suddenly felt dizzy. His position had changed and he came to the woman. Are you all right? The woman asked, staring at him. She had never shifted her attention away from Zen from the start. Seeing that he was in danger, she decided to use Samuel's duplicate to pull him over, helping him avoid the fatal attack. Seeing that the shadow he was controlling failed, Nicholas quickly knew what just happened. Looking coldly towards that woman, he said, "You better mind your own business. When I take control of the Abyss Demon region, I will vanish you in this world." As a ferocious creature of the Abyss Demon region, this woman was capable of reviving countless times. But the master of the Abyss Demon region can control the fate of the monsters in it. I've already told you how important Zen is to me, so you shouldn't be surprised that I helped him. How can I be considered a busybody? The woman uttered with a sneer. If that's the case, then die together. Nicholas reached out to pinch in the air again. This time, another huge shadow appeared beside the woman and tried to grab both Zen and her. Seeing this, Samuel's duplicate, who was standing behind the woman, immediately acted and shook his spear, creating a space channel for them to enter. The shadow ended up missing its target again. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, all three of them appeared on the other side of the void. However, an illusory giant hand grabbed them the moment they appeared. Oh no, I completely forgot that he could see through the future. The expressions on both Zen's and the woman's faces changed drastically at the same time. Nicholas could see the future. But since Zen could see through Nicholas's memory, he stopped using this method earlier. However, when Nicholas made use of it this time, he predicted the location of the three people after employing the grand teleportation technique, giving him time to summon the giant shadow in advance. With this move, he made sure that they couldn't avoid his attack this time. "Let me resist him," shouted the woman. But it was too late. Zen had stood up already. With a loud sound, Zen stood in front of the shadowy giant hand, blocking it like an unbreakable pillar. Puff! Zen spat out another mouthful of blood. With his muscles and bones all trembling, his body ached under the great pressure. After Zen's wild god body was gone, his physical body was still able to emit some of his strength to generate the overbearing golden light. However, the golden light was very weak now, perhaps because he had already suffered a lot of attacks earlier. Clearly, it was difficult to destroy the huge shadow. "Let's go." Raising his hand, Zen called out to the woman who was still in a daze. As the woman nodded her head, Samuel's duplicate put the spear of supreme harmony horizontally. The three disappeared from the huge palm again. Buzz! Just like earlier, Nicholas was able to figure out their movement, and a shadow had been condensed in advance, aiming at their position. "You go ahead. I know a way to deal with this shadow," Zen suggested. Even if Zen could peek into Nicholas's judgment, he couldn't tell the woman to dodge in advance, because telling her would mean a change in the future. Nicholas would surely pick this up and make corresponding changes to his own attack. Chapter 2416, Borrowing Strength. Upon hearing Zen's authoritative voice, the woman had no other choice but to create another space channel. She gritted her teeth while doing it. In an instant, she, together with Samuel's clone, disappeared from Zen's side. As the two of them disappeared, the big hand reappeared and swung at Zen, trying to take a hold of his head. At that moment, Zen's eyes suddenly flashed bright red. It was as if they were made of rubies. Buzz! Slowly, the girl with red eyes and hair emerged and silently floated behind him. He began to stretch out his hand, and as he did, a thin line of red lotuses appeared on his arm. Then, out of nowhere, they shot towards the direction of the big hand of the shadow. The girl had already integrated with him, and they had started to partake in each other's energies. Since the girl's energy hadn't been used up, Zen didn't need to use his internal momentum to produce the red lotuses. The exact moment the red lotuses touched the shadow, an incredibly strong reaction took place. Since the shadow that was summoned by Nicholas was also some kind of energy, the red lotuses were able to transform it into another type of energy. In the eyes of an untrained warrior, the shadow just caught on fire. Phew! In the blink of an eye, the shadow that was over 60,000 feet tall started burning, upping the temperature around it into unfathomable levels. Everyone and everything near it was scrambling to flee to safety. But due to a special method done by Nicholas, despite the giant shadow being tall, it didn't have too much energy. Because of that, its fiery threat only lasted for a couple of seconds and immediately disappeared. After successfully defeating the giant shadow, Zen glanced over his shoulder. When he saw what was happening, his expression darkened. It turned out that while he was battling the giant shadow, Nicholas had already summoned another one to deal with the woman. Phew! The moment the woman came out, a huge hand was already patting her head. She had seen the power of the shadow before. As she could not avoid it, a fierce and determined look flashed across her eyes and she began gathering the force of primitive fear in the black water. "Break it!" With those words, she pointed upwards. The force of primitive fear that surged out of her transformed itself into a brown spear that was over 1,000 feet long and several dozen feet wide. As soon as it took its shape, it shot up towards the shadowy creature. "Although your power is strangely potent, technique is garbage," Nicholas said in a mocking tone. "Utterly useless," he added, a look of great disdain on his face. The woman, unfazed, possessed Samuel's clone. To Nicholas, she was starting to become a big trouble, as she flew around the area. "Since I can't defeat Zen right now, I might as well kill this lady first," he thought. Truly, the force of primitive fear was a kind of strong power. It was actually much stronger than the internal momentum of other holy beings. Unfortunately, the woman only used it by simply transforming its form. And that makes it virtually impossible to use against me, he thought, smirking. Crack. As the shadow's huge hand slapped the long brown spear that was coming towards it, a few cracks appeared in its palm. At the same time, however, the long brown spear was rapidly disintegrating. The way the woman used the force of primitive fear was incredibly basic, not to mention weak and useless. Well, that was because she had paid all her attention to the true demon body all these years. She hadn't studied the force of primitive fear all that much. Soon enough, the brown spear broke into pieces and dissolved into oblivion. Without anything stopping it, the shadow launched its attack. It was going to squish the woman with its huge, bare hands. Swish. Samuel's clone, who was brandishing the spear of supreme harmony, was about to launch a counter-attack against the giant shadow when the woman suddenly exclaimed, "Let's go." But Samuel's clone hesitated. Even if they tried to escape once again, Nicholas would know where they were going to and then kill them. For him, it was meaningless to escape this void. Despite thinking that, the clones obeyed the woman. Although entities like him had the same wisdom and mental capacity as real human beings, their behavior was still tethered to the woman. Because of this, clones like him were considered inferior to the holy beings themselves. That was the reason why the clones were all annihilated except him. Although Samuel's clone was hesitating, he pulled out his spear and opened a space channel. Then he left with the woman through the channel. Just as Samuel's clone had expected, the moment they came out of the space channel, a giant shadowy hand was waiting for them. This time, however, it was already so close that they had no room to dodge it. Bang! The woman and Samuel's clone were hit hard. The power of the shadow giant was immense. The two fell into the void, both of them bleeding from fresh injuries. Phew! Ordered by Nicholas, the huge shadow chased after them in order to hit them once again. At that moment, many thin brown lines appeared out of nowhere. They then became intertwined, forming a huge web, which blocked the new attack of huge palm. Crack! 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 The palm impatiently swept over the thin brown lines to get them out of the way, but every time it did that, deep gashes appeared on it. The lines slowed the speed of the palm incredibly, and so the woman and Samuel's clone managed to escape. With a somersault, the woman was back on her feet. She narrowed her eyes and found that it was Sword Chen who helped her. Sword Chen did not want to help the woman, but he could see that Samuel's clone and the Spear of Supreme Harmony were extremely important to defeat Nicholas. That was the reason why Nicholas wanted to kill the woman. Because of that, at that critical moment, he had no choice but to help the woman. Unfortunately, Sword Chen was not able to stop the giant shadow for good. It once again raised its hand and launched an attack towards the woman. This time, however, she didn't dare to ask Samuel's clone to use the grand teleportation, which would only make her more passive. But then she still was unable to withstand the attack against her. With a slight frown, her eyes became filled with dread and anxiety. Just then, Sword Chen shouted, "Black water. Draw the force of primitive fear in the black water and give it to me." He had already inserted 128 long swords at the bottom of the black water, but he could only use a small part of the force of primitive fear. That was why he was trying his best to produce the most terrifying power of force of primitive fear. He had already managed to perfectly mix the force of primitive fear with the emotion closing godly way over the years. If he could use all the force of primitive fear, he would be able to maximize its power. Of course, the woman was also well aware of that. After all, she had used over 100,000 Sword Chen's clones, and she had used the force of primitive fear to reinforce the strength of those clones. So she did not hesitate when Sword Chen made the request. More than 100 vortexes suddenly appeared in the originally calm black water. The force of primitive fear contained in it was constantly poured into the 128 long swords of Sword Chen. Chapter 2417, The Dark and Light Destruction Sword. By now, Sword Chen had acquired almost all the power in the black water. It would be safe to assume that he was now the master of the black water, replacing the woman. Buzz. His eyes were devoid of any emotions as he looked around, gently flipping his long sword. The internal momentum of emotion closing godly way was mixed with a strong force of primitive fear. God's intimidating strike. Swish. Sword Chen thrust out his sword horizontally as he shouted. As all of the force of primitive fear erupted, a ray of sword radiance spread out. With width stretching to tens of thousands of feet, it cut at the huge shadow at an incredible speed. Its brown sword radiance swept past the shadow's arms and body before it moved forward in the void. Feeling the power of the advancing sword radiance, all the holy beings, demi-holy beings and the consummate true gods along the way were secretly frightened by this move. Was this a sword strike from a demi-holy being? For some reason, their experience during the trip to the Abyss Demon region had greatly subverted their cognition about strength. Sword Chen's sword had completely vanished the shadow now. Watching from afar, Nicholas couldn't hide his disappointment. He didn't pay much attention to this man all this while. Looking at him now, Nicholas remembered how he looked exactly like the dead bodies buried at the foot of the snow mountain. Why did this man suddenly appear out of nowhere? Why did it seem like he was able to fully borrow the woman's power? Well, it doesn't change anything. Nicholas still regarded these people as insignificant as ants. After Sword Chen had employed all his strength to his strike, Nicholas was sure he could no longer resist. Stretching out his hand upward, Nicholas made another shadow appear to attack Sword Chen. Sword Chen was now in the state of emotion closing. His face remained calm as he awaited the attack. Then, putting his sword horizontally, he started to launch the second strike. The woman watched with a displeased expression. She couldn't always rely on Sword Chen. Although the black water was filled with massive force of primitive fear, she knew that it would eventually be used up. Suddenly, the woman heard a voice message. "Send me to Nicholas's side. I'll deal with him." Turning her head, she found Zen from a distance, her eyes revealing a puzzled expression. She responded, "But he can see the future. Even if I send you there, he can discover you immediately. How can you deal with him?" "That may not be the case," Zen answered, a smile lingering in his lips. "Just do as I say." The woman was stunned upon hearing Zen's confident reply. However, she still followed his request, asking Samuel's clone to act immediately. After being slapped by the shadow, Samuel's clone had been badly injured. However, being a holy being, he could control the Spear of Supreme Harmony at will. As he pointed the Spear of Supreme Harmony at Zen, a space channel had covered Zen and sent him to Nicholas's side. With his full concentration, Zen had activated the Jade Seal in his hand. Driven by the Jade Seal, all the bugs started to move, erasing 9 seconds from the Divine Land. On the other hand, Nicholas had also noticed the movements made by Samuel's clone. As he saw that he raised his spear horizontally, a strange expression flashed in his eyes even before he got shocked. What happened? The future suddenly disappeared. Since Zen had used the Jade Seal to erase the next few seconds, Nicholas went blind on what would happen. However, the space channel had already been created, so Zen managed to appear behind Nicholas unnoticed. Nicholas tried to respond quickly. Having seen Zen use the Jade Seal before, he knew what Zen had done the moment the future had gone blank. With the sound coming from behind him, Nicholas was prompted to turn around instinctively. Swish, swish, a line of red lotuses swept over his head. Nicholas fell. The red lotuses followed him and quickly grew around him. Seeing that he couldn't avoid them, Nicholas clenched his teeth and stretched out his hand. Soon, a cloth bag appeared. He opened it wide, spreading strong internal momentum and covering one end of the red lotuses. It was true that the red lotuses could transform all the energies, but they could do nothing to time. After he was able to cover all the red lotuses at the forefront, they were bound by time and couldn't continue to extend down. With the help of the bag, Nicholas managed to escape. However, the red lotuses continued to grow fast and intertwine. Even though Nicholas's cloth bag had blocked the first few vines, the others were still able to quickly extend down, trapping him into a bigger cage. Humph! Nicholas originally thought that he was invincible, having employed the Dark Light World transformation composed of 3 thurgies. The first one was called the Dark Light Shadow, which was powerful and extraordinary. The Dark Light Shadow would have allowed him to get rid of his opponents, but he hadn't expected the crisis to come. In anger, he gently opened his hands, making the huge 8 diagrams disc above the void spin again. Each time he used 1 thurgy of the Dark Light World transformation, he would get double damage. Since the Dark Light Shadow was unable to stop Zen, Nicholas tried to use the second thurgy. Dark and Light Destruction Sword. As the huge 8 diagrams disc overhead slowly rotated, the aura that it emitted became weaker. Shortly after, a small 8 diagrams disc appeared in Nicholas's hand. It was the aura of the big 8 diagrams disc but now gathered in the small one. Phew! On the basis of the 8 diagrams disc, a long black and white sword formed. Swish! Lifting the black and white sword, Nicholas aimed it towards Zen. The Dark and Light Destruction Sword could stop the reincarnation of life and death, giving full play to the truth of dark and light chaos. Even if the red lotuses could light all the energies, Nicholas was confident that his sword could cut them off. Before Nicholas launched his attack, Zen's expression changed slightly. Being able to read Nicholas's memory, he saw that the red lotuses couldn't burn Nicholas's black and white sword. As Nicholas hacked his long sword down, he had cut off all the red lotuses, turning them into flames. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In a few moments, what Zen saw really happened. Waving his long two-colored sword, Nicholas cut off all the red lotuses, and then rushed to directly attack Zen. Now, let's see how you block my strike, Nicholas said coldly. He had paid a heavy price to get the sword. He was determined to get back at Zen. The dark and light destruction sword could stop birth and death, destroying everything. No one, not even Zen, could resist his sword attack. Right after Nicholas's banter, a crisp sound echoed. Holding his long sword horizontally, Zen stood and blocked Nicholas's sword. It was true that the dark and light destruction sword was powerful enough to chop the red lotuses off, but it could not damage the shadow-bearing sword that Harper had given to Zen. Chapter 2418, The Rebellion. Seeing that Zen had blocked his dark and light destruction sword, Nicholas was a bit shocked. When he came to his senses, the dark and light destruction sword suddenly twisted. Like a nimble little snake, it snuck away from Zen's shadow-bearing sword, stabbing his head. Despite the attack, Zen looked calm. Lifting his shadow-bearing sword, he pushed away Nicholas's strike. Bang, bang, bang. They were already close to each other to fight. Zen launched again, his strike appearing very decisively and skillfully, while Nicholas swung his sword lightly and constantly. Although Nicholas could see through the future, Zen was using this to his advantage by observing his memory. As they fought, their sword moves seemed to be set in advance. They appeared like longtime buddies who were practicing their sword skills together. The people around them gaped as they watched, thinking they were really just sparring with each other. Buzz. Every time Zen waved his sword, its energy mixed with that of the red lotuses which coiled around the body of the shadow-bearing sword, making it even more powerful. Although the dark and light destruction sword was extremely powerful, its black and white light trembled and then dimmed each time it collided with Zen's shadow-bearing sword. If this continued, the dark and light destruction sword would collapse sooner or later. Realizing this, Zen grew braver and more formidable. Nicholas's eyebrows wrinkled slightly. He tried his best to keep a calm expression, though he was starting to worry. If this continued, his dark and light destruction sword would not be able to hold on. The red lotuses were not very terrifying, but when they were combined with the internal momentum controlled by Zen, Nicholas found them difficult to resist. What the heck? How could he do that? When Zen knew what Nicholas was thinking, his attack was even more violent. Bang, 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 he struck 3 times in a row. Even though Nicholas blocked the middle strike, the sword's radiance on both sides still spread out at an incredible speed. Nicholas continued to retreat. At the same time, the light of the dark and light destruction sword continued to grow dimmer. If the fight went on, he was bound to lose. Being proud of his unique skill he had been using, Nicholas couldn't believe that it was not enough to defeat Zen. Buzz. Just then, Roche and the blue-eyed girl finally finished their fusion. When he raised his hand gently, some beautiful ice flowers started to surround his wrist, emitting a terrible cold air. The blue-eyed girl makes any energy still, putting it under a low temperature, Roche murmured, staring at the ice flowers. Lowell, help me. Nicholas's eyes lit up the moment he saw Roche, who was also the Lowell that he knew. Seeing the power of the burning of the red lotuses, the remaining holy beings, demi-holy beings and consummate true gods were all scared to death. Since Roche had merged with the blue-eyed girl, he might have the ability to defeat Zen. Roche turned around when he heard Nicholas's call, but he gazed back with a strange look in his eyes. The woman was also anxious at the sight of this scene. Roche accidentally mixed with the girl with blue eyes. If he teamed up with Nicholas, how could Zen defeat him? On the other hand, Samuel was observing the fight between Nicholas and Zen silently. Since the woman was staring at him, it was difficult for him to find an opportunity. But once he found a chance, he would not hesitate to make his move. Roche floated towards the 2 warriors, gently shaking his right hand to reveal his right arm. A golden bandage was wrapped around his arm, showing countless mysterious divine textures all over it. These divine textures were engraved by someone Roche hired in the divine land. After he sneaked into the divine land, he had been all alone. Carrying the soaring snake sword would probably make his identity exposed, especially after he entered the Dongfang clan, so he had to seal the soaring snake sword on his right arm. Unwrapping the bandage on his right arm, a vast aura started to emit from it. Although the aura emitted by the huge 8 diagrams on the top of the void was strong, the vast aura from Roche's arm didn't fall weak at all. As the golden light flashed from his right arm, the soaring snake sword appeared in Roche's hand. It shone as bright as the sun under the dazzling golden light. That sword. I never knew Lowell possesses such a treasure. Is that sword also a supreme treasure of belief? Some of the spectators were totally confused after sensing the power of Rocher's soaring snake sword. Although Nicholas valued Rocher highly, he was still just a famous consummate true god of the Dongfang clan. In terms of the status, he was definitely inferior to Troy. Where could he have gotten such a treasure? Nicholas was shocked to see Rocher with the soaring snake sword. The shadow-bearing sword under Zen's care was already a very powerful match against his dark and light destruction sword. But the sword Rocher took out was actually more extraordinary. Buzz, carrying the soaring snake sword in his hand, Rocher flew over in the void and stood between them. Let's work together to kill this brat and split the true demon body from his body. When the two true demon bodies merge into one, you can have both of them. Nicholas offered. As Nicholas couldn't inherit the true demon body, he thought the most suitable candidate to get the true demon body would either be Troy or Lowell. Lightly shaking the soaring snake sword, Rocher pointed it at Zen. Wisps of cold air rose from its surface as ice formed quietly. Raising his eyebrows, Zen stared at Rocher. If Rocher killed him now, he would indeed be able to inherit the complete true demon body. If he chose to turn traitor at this moment, the consequences would be unimaginable. A faint smile appeared on Nicholas's face. He was about to move and join hands with Rocher. But Rocher shifted and pointed his sword's tip at Nicholas. The other people in the void, including Samuel and that woman, gasped. Their faces were filled with confusion as they watched what had been happening. Of course, everyone had a different mood. Lowell, why is he pointing his sword at Nicholas? Isn't he the consummate true god of the Dongfang clan? Troy has been skeptical of Lowell before, saying there is something wrong with his origin. I can't believe that his suspicions are right. Rochelle was close to Troy, so she knew his doubts before. But the Dongfang clan's affair was not something that others would casually ask about. Now Troy was dead, and there was indeed something wrong with Lowell. Lowell, what do you mean? Nicholas got gloomy upon seeing Rocher's action. He immediately thought of Troy. He was previously approached by Troy as he was skeptical about Rocher's origin, but he didn't take it seriously. He thought that Troy just felt that his position was threatened by Rocher, so he was jealous of him. It was naturally for him to hate him. The point was that in Nicholas's opinion, he was still able to suppress Rocher who had the strange background. After all, Rocher was only a consummate true god. Even the demi-holy beings and holy beings would be controlled by him, let alone the consummate true gods. However, Nicholas was shocked as he hadn't expected that he would encounter such a matter. Chapter 2419, Refine. Rocher was feeling slightly uneasy. He replied, we are in different positions. What did you say? Different positions. Nicholas's eyes were full of disappointment. I treated you so well. Rocher had entered the floating island of the Dongfang clan and received the resources and training of the clan. He had smoothly explored those forbidden lands with their help. And his marriage was granted by Nicholas himself. Rocher shook his head and said, I'm not Lowell. My name is Rocher Hua, and I am from the evolutionary universe. Hearing his answer, Nicholas was slightly stunned. The expression in his eyes suddenly became fierce. At the same time, a self-mocking smile appeared on his face. Evolutionary universe. Were you also trained by Mike? Yes, Rocher answered firmly. Ha ha ha. Nicholas's laughter grew louder and more sinister. He was hugely frustrated. The reason for his distress was not Zen or Rocher, but Mike. Mike was really a cunning man. He died a long time ago, but he still managed to get back at me, muttered Nicholas. His eyes flashed. The dark and light destruction sword in his hand suddenly grew 3 feet longer and flew towards Rocher at an incredible speed. Watch out! Zen was taken aback. A flash of the fire lingered on the shadow-bearing sword and he also wielded his sword. However, Rocher was very close to Nicholas. The latter's sneak attack gave no time to Zen to help Rocher out. Rocher still maintained his calmness. A unique light flashed in his eyes, and an irresistible aura emitted from his body. Under the aura's influence, no one was allowed to make a move on him. If it was someone else, they wouldn't be able to stab Rocher. However, Nicholas was not an ordinary person after all. His soul of light was very close to the other shore. It was far stronger than the ordinary souls of light. The aura emanating from Rocher's body merely made Nicholas's movements a little slower, but the dark and light destruction sword continued to advance forward. Thankfully, this slow pace gave Rocher enough time to react. Buzz. Soaring snake sword. Ice flowers fluttered on the soaring snake sword, and at the same time, some strange streaks of lightning burst forth. Back in the universe, Rocher had not been able to unleash the full power of the soaring snake sword. However, now he had become stronger than before. Bang! When the dark and light destruction sword collided with the soaring snake sword, Nicholas felt a chill emanating from his hand, as if he was being frozen. Not only that, the beams of lightning rushed towards Nicholas. They were like the tusks of a giant beast that wanted to devour Nicholas. This is the punishment lightning of the ruling slate. When Nicholas's eyes fell on the lightning, it looked as if he had seen a ghost. He was the one who had revised the largest number of rules among all the holy beings. Therefore, he was familiar with the punishment lightning of the ruling slate. No one could deflect it. In the past, some holy beings had racked their brains to find a way to avoid the punishment lightning of the ruling slate, but no one had succeeded so far. Therefore, once the ruling slate summoned the punishment lightning, many holy beings had no option but to surrender. Maybe the power of the punishment lightning unleashed by Rocher was not as powerful as that of the ruling slate, but the momentum was pretty much the same. Left with no choice, Nicholas was forced to make a hasty retreat. However, as soon as he retreated to the other side, Zen followed him closely. Splash! Zen's sword struck him hard. Nicholas couldn't avoid it and had to raise his sword to block the attack. Clang! When the two swords collided, the light of the dark and light destruction sword was dimmed again to some extent. Nicholas continued to fall, in the process, distancing himself from Zen. But Rocher had gone around the circle and once again tried to stab Nicholas with his sword from the other side. Already Nicholas was finding it quite difficult to deal with Zen, and now with Rocher joining the fight, he was under tremendous pressure. Bang, bang, bang! He fought with the two men with all his strength. In terms of swordsmanship alone, Nicholas was much stronger than Zen and Rocher. After all, he had spent a lot of time practicing it and his lifespan was much longer than Zen's and Rocher's. Moreover, he had encountered all kinds of dangerous situations before. So he also had experience on his side. But Zen and Rocher had extraordinary theurgies, and they had combined the abilities of the two girls. Now their power was so great that ordinary holy beings would be no match for them. Nicholas could see the future, but due to Zen's ability to read memories, it was difficult for him to use his skill. Nicholas was in great danger right now. The members of the alliance of powerful clans were very worried. After all, they were trapped there, and their only hope was Nicholas. Now even he was in danger. How would they escape? Humph! Nicholas blocked Zen's sword which was coming at him. Suddenly a black light appeared in his palm and the next moment it zoomed to Rocher. Whoosh! The black light lashed out and knocked Rocher out. Nicholas took the opportunity to retreat quickly. This was the only trick he could use to get rid of these two formidable foes. But when he was a little far away, he suddenly sensed a force of space sweeping across and enveloping him. The scene in front of him changed. Zen's sword was already poised to slash his head. Samuel, you! Nicholas was furious at this point. He finally managed to distance himself from Zen and Rocher, but Samuel created a space channel and pushed him right back to Zen once again. Samuel, on the other hand, was very proud of himself and was smiling triumphantly. His goal was the true demon body too, but at this critical moment, he was more willing to hinder Nicholas. The woman's eyes lit up when she saw what Samuel had done. She couldn't join the battle with the trio now, but she could also use the Spear of Supreme Harmony to help Zen. Crack, crack, crack! Nicholas's dark and light destruction sword was getting dimmer and dimmer by the minute. Zen's unrelenting and fierce attack caused the long black and white sword to finally disintegrate into black and white fragments that gathered in the huge 8 diagrams disc above. Zen's long sword was pointed at Nicholas, and Rocher was blocking his escape route. It's over, said Zen lightly. Today he finally had the thrilling opportunity to kill his enemy, but he was abnormally calm. Nicholas stared at Zen. Although Zen was still a young man, he vaguely saw Mike's shadow in Zen. Is it over? Nicholas heaved a sigh of relief quietly. It seemed that he had made up his mind. Suddenly, he laughed manically and said, "Good. It should be over." He waved his hands upward. The 8 diagrams disc above the void began to rotate once more. The heaven and earth form a furnace, and dark and light energies are charcoal. Everything is copper. Nicholas folded his hands all of a sudden and shouted loudly, "I'm the craftsman." Refine. Splash. The aura within the void suddenly became 10 times stronger than before. As the huge 8 diagrams disc rotated like a millstone, it seemed as if it was going to refine everything within the void. Chapter 2420, The Vortex That Pulled Everyone Inside. The dark light world transformation was powerful. But since it was harmful to one's soul, only a few people in the source world would choose to practice this technique. The first and second levels of this technique were still acceptable, since they only caused limited damage to the souls which could be healed after years of rest. But its third level, namely the furnace of dark and light, was regarded as a taboo method. Using this method at the expense of one's own soul, they could use the truth of dark and light chaos that they had comprehended all at once. In the source world, it was a method used to refine weapons, and not a method to destroy your enemies. In order to create peerless weapons, disciples were specially trained by some great forces on using the truth of dark and light chaos. Finally, they forced and tempted them to use the furnace of dark and light. Some powerful forces had once ordered over 100 consummate true gods to use the furnace of dark and light in order to refine some tough materials, which then cost their own lives. Whoosh! As the 8-diagram disc rotated, the entire space began rotating along with it. It forces me to go along with it, a consummate true god exclaimed, staring at the 8-diagram disc in a daze. Does Holy Nicholas intend to refine us too? A demi-holy being with a long face queried. Yes, he wants to sacrifice us all. This is unfair. Hearing this, terror appeared in Rochelle's eyes. No one knew what price Nicholas would have to pay or whether he could be reborn since he employed this technique. Either way, she knew she was doomed to die, anyway. Everyone within this space was pulled into the vortex without a choice. At the center of the vortex was Nicholas. Swoosh, swoosh. Noticing how unfavorable the situation was for them, Zen and Rocher both thrust their swords at Nicholas. However, it seemed too late. As soon as their swords penetrated through Nicholas's body, they collided with each other, making a clanging sound. At the same time, Nicholas's flesh seemed to have turned into nothingness. Zen and Rocher both felt a strong pull, dragging them into Nicholas's body. Rocher tried to pull out the soaring snake sword with all his might, but to his surprise, it didn't move at all. Seeing that Rocher was about to be sucked into Nicholas's body, Zen gritted his teeth, bursting out the power in his body and slamming the shadow-bearing sword into Rocher's sword. Bang! With his full strength, the soaring snake sword was knocked out from Nicholas's body, while the shadow-bearing sword was snapped in half. Even though Harper highly valued the shadow-bearing sword as a good weapon, it was not as solid as the soaring snake sword. With Zen's great strength, it broke apart inside Nicholas's body. It was a pity that Zen still hadn't fully grasped the weapon yet. There was no time to hesitate due to this urgent circumstance. Zen immediately abandoned the sword and fled backward together with Rocher, trying to resist the strong pull and escape. Standing steady in the center, Nicholas flashed a crazy smile as he watched them struggling. He didn't attempt to catch them. Instead, he let out a hysterical laugh and said, "Just run, run. Where can you run to?" In Nicholas's opinion, there was no way these two could escape anyway. No matter how far they fled, they would eventually be pulled into the vortex. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Everyone in the void was spinning around with Nicholas as the center. The spinning speed was getting faster as time went on, trapping everyone in an invisible vortex. Run towards the edge. Aware that she couldn't just wait for death, Rochelle called out to the remaining people to try to escape. The pull was still not difficult to resist. The moment they realized what they were supposed to do, everyone flew towards the edge of the vortex. At first, they could still move swiftly. However, after covering a certain distance, they started to feel the pull increasing. The pull is getting stronger. I can't move anymore. What is going on? One of the demi-holy beings was originally very far away from Nicholas. However, after he rushed over 100 miles, he started to feel the space around him becoming impenetrable. Exerting his full strength with the hope to escape, he was surprised that he couldn't move another inch. Soon, they realized that there was an invisible barrier at the edge of the huge vortex. It didn't matter what method they tried to use. It was just impossible for them to break this invisible barrier. Zen, let's go. Seeing this, the woman ordered Samuel's clone to create a space channel. It was enough to cover Zen and Rocher at the same time. In a blink of an eye, they both reappeared by her side, and Sword Chen approached them as well. As Samuel's clone brandished the Spear of Supreme Harmony, he set up a new space channel, connecting it to the outside of the vortex. The 5 of them then entered the space channel simultaneously. Meanwhile, Samuel stared at Nicholas, a sullen look appearing in his eyes. He was hoping that Nicholas and Zen would fight to death. However, Nicholas had let him down, leaving him no chance to hurt Zen at all. Knowing that Nicholas would probably pay a huge price after he employed such a method, he doubted if Nicholas could even be reborn in his universe. It seemed that this would be the end for this sworn enemy after all. Still, Samuel didn't feel satisfied with the results. Since this was his second chance to be a holy being, he believed that he should be the ruler of the divine land. He could not reconcile to let Zen and Rocher get the true demon body. However, he had no confidence to fight them, seeing that even Nicholas was no match for them. It seemed that he would have to wait for an opportunity. Keeping this in mind, he brandished the Spear of Supreme Harmony unhurriedly and prepared to leave through the space channel. Samuel, can you please take me with you? I will absolutely express my gratitude after we return to the floating islands, a long-haired warrior begged Samuel. He was a demi-holy being from the Bai clan. Seeing that everyone was trapped in this vortex, he knew that his strength wouldn't be enough to escape on his own. After witnessing how the woman took Zen and the others away, he decided to ask Samuel's help to leave together in the same way. Samuel only snorted in reply. Technically, there was no reason why he needed to help this guy. As the internal momentum of the space godly way emitted from his body, he immediately disappeared on the spot. Moving along the space channel, he suddenly bumped into an invisible wall. With a muffled grunt, he stumbled out from the space channel. The expression on his face changed dramatically as he looked around once. Apparently, he failed to leave through the space channel. He was still inside the vortex. Standing on the other side, the woman, Zen, Rocher and Sword Chen all had a terrible look on their faces. We can't escape through the space channel, the woman concluded with a frown. Looking back at Nicholas from a distance, Sword Chen took a deep breath. Are we really going to die here today? He asked, sighing helplessly.